Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you are tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
All right, welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is June 16th, 2025. It is a great Monday. I hope everybody out there is having a great Monday. We're grateful that all of you are here joining us for the show. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Rebecca Biblioteca and Radio Free Mormon. How are the two of you tonight?
Excellent.
Good evening.
Great. And before we jump into our stories, Rebecca, you've got a few announcements. I'll put this up on the screen and let you turn the slides there and tell us a few things before we jump into it.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a few little things before we dive into the news that we have today. I just wanted to kind of update everybody on Nemo. I know a lot of people have been concerned. Back on June 6th, he was taken to the hospital and has been hospitalized, having had, as he said in his video when he kind of explained what happened, a stroke that affected his legs. It was some kind of something like a blood clot, almost like a hardened blood clot. He showed like a picture of, a brain scan. He really got into it. You guys need to go find that short video that he put out, but he's doing much better now. And we just want him to know we love you, Nemo. And if you need anything, please contact us. And we send you all our well wishes. Any thoughts from you guys on Nemo? We were all really concerned. So we were glad to hear, exactly what happened and that he is on the mend.
I was deeply surprised to hear this, and I'm just glad to hear that, like you said, that he's on the mend and getting better. And so our thoughts go out to you, Nemo, and hope that everything is going well as you start to improve.
Yes, absolutely. All the best for a speedy recovery, Nemo.
Yep, that's right. We need Nemo. We absolutely do. So we love you, Nemo. All right. One more thing I want to mention before we start the news is to say a belated Happy Father's Day to both of you guys and to all of the fathers out there, in the newscast audience. Did you guys both have a good day?
Had a great day.
Good.
I had a wonderful day. Best Father's Day ever.
Oh,
Nice.
I think I saw some pictures that you were doing some pretty fun stuff.
Yes. But of course, this individual in the keychain, he is the father of us all.
And that's it. Yeah. Someone posted this on social media, and you know how when you attend an LDS ward, much like Mother's Day, they will give a gift of appreciation to the fathers, or usually they say like any guy over 18 or any, for women, it's any girl over 18. And, for Father's Day, they're always kind of struggling. For Mother's Day, it's pretty easy, a plant, some chocolate. So this ward came up with this very attractive keychain. Again, this is for the fathers, and this picture of Jesus that smile is blinding. Someone posting in the comments on this picture said, oh, the incredible orthodontist there in first century Palestine. This is amazing.
That's how you know Jesus was a Mormon.
I think that's it, that blinding smile. So yeah, and someone else said, why does it look like Julia Roberts with a beard? But we've talked about this before. We've said, all these Fabio looking Jesuses that are just, almost like porn stars. But anyway, this was a gift. So in the chat, let us know what you got in your ward. If you were there, my ward passed out cinnamon rolls. Always on board with that. That would be great. So
wait,
anyway,
you were in church yesterday, Rebecca?
I was in church for the first time in about 5 years because I had a family event. We'll just say that I got to show up to. So it was very interesting. But yes, I was there. I put on my little cap sleeve and I showed up, and it was good. And I'm glad I did because I got a cinnamon roll. So.
Oh, did you even think about not putting on your cap sleeve?
Do you know, I did think about not doing it, but I'm willing to do it because had I not done it, it would have caused, just a little bit of pause for people. And just by simply putting on an inch right here, I was able to blend in, walk among people without any kind of undue, upsetness. So I'm okay. I'm a people pleaser. Anyway, yes. I just wanted to say that. Happy Father's Day and, speedy recovery, Nemo. And now let's take it back to Bill and the news.
All right. So we've got some really great stories tonight. Some of them, there's a few that are beyond what's written here, but these are the main ones. First up, missing polygamy revelation was in the vault. Radio Free Mormon will be giving us the down low on that. The Cody Temple final ruling by WSC. That will be Rebecca Bishop Wright's letter defending child sex abuse perpetrator. Which one of you two is covering that one? Rebecca. And there's steeple doctrine in the news. So this is something very different than the Mormon angle that we've been covering. And then also what's next for Jake Retzlaff, and I think I spelled wrong, but NBYU. And so I'll turn the time over here to RFM, and you can take us through our first story.
All right, thanks a lot. This is my headline for tonight's story. The LDS Church finally stops lying about not possessing John Taylor's 1886 revelation that the commandment to practice plural marriage will never be abrogated. And that's a lot of information in one headline, but I think it pretty well sums up the whole story. Here is the synopsis. At the beginning of this, it may take around 30 minutes, I think, to go through the information I want to share with you in the documents. This is the synopsis of everything. 1886, John Taylor, third president of the LDS Church, receives a revelation that God will not, indeed cannot, revoke the command to practice plural marriage. 1890, 4 years later, John Taylor has passed away, and Wilford Woodruff, the fourth president of the LDS Church, issues the manifesto revoking the command to practice plural marriage. In 1911, John W. Taylor, an apostle in the Quorum of the 12 of the LDS Church and son of the third president, John Taylor, John W. Taylor was excommunicated at a hearing by the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He presents the revelation of his father, John Taylor, that he received in 1886 to the quorum. Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith, yes, that Joseph Fielding Smith, the one who would become the 10th president of the LDS Church. In 1911, he was the new kid on the block. Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith admits to having made a copy of the revelation, which we'll find out was in 1909, and placed it in the historian's office. This is found in the minutes, the official minutes of the meeting. 1933, the church issues what is called the Third Manifesto, claiming that the Taylor revelation, the 1886 revelation, is not in the archives of the church and never even existed. That is a first presidency statement. It contains a palpable lie. Now, recently, and just over the weekend, it was discovered that the church has apparently quietly released this very Taylor revelation on the church history catalog website, which revelation the church has possessed the entire time. So that's the synopsis of the story. This document, by the way, Rebecca, you mentioned earlier when we were talking that it's the linchpin of the fundamentalist, polygamist Mormon offshoots.
I think it is seen that way, absolutely. And as I've been looking at the reaction all over social media, it is. They've always said this exists. They've always said this is the reason that in their mind, they continued what God wanted them to do, right? The rest of us, the Brighamites, we broke that covenant, we broke that promise. So the fact that the LDS Church has had this the entire time, whether they knew it or not, I mean, I guess that's up for debate. They knew it 100 years ago, but did they know it recently? I don't know. I have a lot of conspiracy theories around it, but yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a founding document saying this is why we had to do what we were doing. We were commanded to do it.
Yes. So I wanted you to bring that up, and thank you, because this is more than just an embarrassing incident for the church and being caught again lying red-handed. This is about a very controversial document, which the church, for good reason, I'm sure they thought it was good reason that they were going to lie about it and say it didn't exist and they didn't have it when they did, and we know that they did, and we'll prove that tonight. They thought it was a good reason, good enough reason for them to lie about it. But that's because it was so powerful and so controversial, and it meant so much to all these fundamentalist Mormons. In effect, it proves that they're right. And the church, to some extent, must have felt the same way Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through all this effort to hide it. Okay? All right, then. Let's go ahead and go through some more slides. By the way, stop me at any point if you have anything to add. All right? So this is what happened very recently. And this was discovered, I believe, Rebecca, you told me it was Christina Gagliani. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Hopefully I'm
of Mormon
pronouncing that correct.
studies. The first time I saw it posted was when Lindsay Hansen Park
Mm,
had reposted what Christina had found, and Lindsay had made a statement about the importance and relevance of this, because I think it was just kind of starting to trickle out. A new document found. What does that mean? We hear that all the time, but
mhm.
when you started to read about what it was and the historical context and what it meant, I think that's when we all realized, wow, this is like a match to some Tinder. This is going to get big.
Yeah, I want to do our best job we could of at least attributing the person who made this discovery, because the church is not announcing this. The church is not giving any headlines. There's no, hyperlinks to this, right? This is just appearing. And then people will find it when and if they do. But for whatever reason they did it this way, I want to continue with the facts of the story. So I think this was over this past weekend that this came to light. And you can see it's upper left-hand corner, church history catalog. And this is 28 pages that you can find there. And they have a number of things as part of them. We'll get to them in a second here. The first 2 pages, right? It's actually the first 4 pages because they have the front and the back, but it's only written on the front of each, is the revelation itself in John Taylor's handwriting. This is what all the hubbub's been about and what the church denied that it had in 1933. It may not have had it in 1933. Excuse me. It may not have had it in the first half of 1993, but they definitely had it by the second half of 1993, after they'd issued that first presidency statement, which to my knowledge, they never modified or said, oh, well, hey, this part isn't right anymore. We actually do have this now in our possession in the vault. We've got the revelation in John Taylor's own handwriting. And that's part of the story as well. So this is on the church history catalog. This is the general information about what is contained in these documents, description, revelation about the new and everlasting covenant as written by John Taylor. It's interesting that there's no equivocation being made about the provenance of it here. It's not saying claimed to be written by John Taylor or allegedly written by or thought by some to be written by. It's just written by John Taylor. There's no question about it from the point of view of the person who's writing this description. We'll see if that changes. File includes John Taylor's 1886 handwritten copy and a handwritten copy by a Taylor family member. Also includes an 18 July 1933 memorandum from J. Reuben Clark Jr. about the provenance of the copy in John Taylor's handwriting. A 1909 typescript copy of the Revelation by Joseph Fielding Smith, and additional typescript copies, also available in electronic format. And you can check all those out like I did earlier today in preparation for the show. So here's a few of the things. Here's, when I say things, I mean envelopes. Each of these is a separate document, and these are envelopes in which some of these were folded up and carried and then typed on in order to show what it was, right? So it's the revelation. All of them have either a copy, a handwritten copy, or a typewritten copy of this revelation. And there are several of each, along with the original. And here's one that's called President John Taylor's Revelation. On that envelope, here was an envelope from Beneficial Life Insurance Company. And you look over there on the right-hand side, and if you turn your head over, you can see it says Revelation to John Taylor. And that's what it contained as well. Now, here is the actual revelation itself. This is how faint it is. But this is written in John Taylor's own hand. And it's September, it's 1886. He's on the run. He's in hiding because the federales are after him because he won't stop practicing plural marriage. And in this state of distress, by the way, I think he'll pass away within a year. July of the following year, I think he passes away. In these straitened circumstances, he prays to God and asks him a question. and a revelation comes that is first person in the words of God. It's portrayed as being in the mouth of God. You know, it's not like the family proclamation that says, you know, we believe this and we believe that and we believe something else. This is, I am God and I'm telling you this. It's the language that we are used to reading in the Doctrine and Covenants with this first person God. Now, as I said, a number of typewritten copies were made. This is one of them. There's John Taylor over there on the right. But here's a transcript that Rebecca was nice enough to put together. And then I copied and pasted it here. Can you read this for us, Rebecca?
No.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
really
If you don't
small.
want to, I could ask Bill.
You could ask Bill. I have to say though, I know there were typewritten copies, in the documents, but I wanted to see if I could translate it from the original handwriting, because that is one of my skills. I learned being raised by genealogists. How many hours did I spend in front of the microfilm reader, the microfiche reader, looking at old faint handwriting? So I did, and then of course I compared it against the type. So
And what was
then
the
someone else
comparison?
suggested, making the different little points there. So
But
yeah,
what was
it's
the
a little.
comparison? Was it the same as the others?
I had left out one word, and that was, I think, seed or something like that. But yeah, I thought I still got it. Whatever it is, I got it.
You do. You've got it. And
But I can't read it. It's too small. So, Bill,
oh,
you're
I'm
going to have to
sorry.
do
The
it.
reason I'm asking is because I wanted to make sure that this is a good copy of what's on the actual original.
Yeah, I think it is. I've compared it to others. So,
Okay.
Can I just note before I do read it, if I go back to that envelope,
Mhm.
I do find it interesting that it says file no one. And I assume, knowing this situation pretty much in its entirety, I only say that because you and I covered this as an episode early on in Mormonism Live's history. But file no one, file it away, and no one is to see this because, anyway, sorry.
I saw that too, but can I just suggest that maybe it might mean file number 1?
Maybe,
oh,
possibly. I don't know that though. Maybe. Okay.
But there is what do you call it? The pencil on the envelope under the typewritten part, President John Taylor's Revelations on the outside of the envelope. It contained one of these copies, or maybe the original. I don't know, but it says file underlined, then capital N-O, not underlined, then 1 written out, O-N-E, and underlined. File no 1 or file. And there is not. Is there a period after that N-O?
I don't see one.
Okay, well, we probably pursued this far enough for the show, but I don't know. It's a strange thing, and I noticed it too, and I thought that can't really mean file no one.
Yeah. Okay. So the transcript of the 1886 John Taylor Revelation. My son John, you have asked me concerning the new and everlasting covenant, and how far it is binding upon my people. Thus saith the Lord, all commandments that I give must be obeyed by those calling themselves by my name, unless they are revoked by me or by my authority. And how can I revoke an everlasting covenant? For I, the Lord, am everlasting, and my everlasting covenants cannot be abrogated nor done away with, but they stand forever. Have I not given my word in great plainness on this subject? Yet have not great numbers of my people been negligent in the observance of my laws and in keeping of my commandment, and yet have I borne with them these many years, and this because of their weakness, because of the perilous times. And furthermore, it is more pleasing to me that men should use their free agency. Oh man, there's Jesus using the word free agency when that term doesn't exist anywhere in the scriptures.
I guess it does now.
That's a strange thing, huh?
Ruh-roh, Elder Bednar.
Jesus actually is on the record saying free agency, huh? Use their free agency in
Bill,
regards.
Bill.
Yes, please.
Jesus was speaking as a man.
Half man, I'll give you that. Okay. Use their free agency in regards to these matters. Nevertheless, I, the Lord, do not change. Well, just wait 4 years, Jesus. And my word and my covenants and my law do not. And as I have heretofore said by my servant Joseph, all those who would enter into my glory must and shall obey my law. And have I not commanded men that if they were Abraham's seed and would enter into my glory, they must do the works of Abraham? I have not revoked this law, nor will I, for it is everlasting. And those who will enter into my glory must obey the conditions thereof. Even so, amen.
Okay. So this is pretty darn clear and pretty cut and dried on the issue of plural marriage. Yeah, I commanded it, man, and I meant what I said, and my commandments don't pass away. So you got to keep doing it no matter what. And then 4 years later, here comes Wilford Woodruff, and he says, we give.
Can I
And,
just say-
circumstances. I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, can I just say that people have been asking me, because I've been posting about this a lot, where does it say polygamy? Where does it say plural marriage? It doesn't. It says the everlasting covenant. Well, how do we know that means polygamy? How do we know Abraham's seed? You see what I mean? It's already started like that.
Well, if they want to ignore the historical context of this, it could not possibly refer to anything else. It's because of plural marriage and the commandment to live that principle with a capital P, and that rhymes with T anyway. But that principle, right? And that's why he's on the run. That's why John Taylor's in hiding. He's not asking the Lord, how far is, I don't know, baptism for the dead,
Mhm.
How long do we have to do baptism for the dead, God? He's
Yeah,
not
but
asking about
people
how
haven't
long
done
do we
it,
have to
right?
use
Yeah.
the sacrament and use stale, moldy bread from Safeway. How long do we have to do that, Lord? He's not asking, he's asking about plural marriage, obviously. It can be nothing else. But these are the arguments from desperation.
Can I just say, if folks want to go listen to the episode we did titled Think Celestial Marriage before 1890, we show tons of documentation that not only is plural marriage called celestial marriage, and that's been changed, but that plural marriage was also under the new and everlasting covenant, not as a tangent under a major subheading of other things, but it was the new and everlasting covenant.
Yeah, and I think why we're getting the pushback, if you go back to the Revelation, it clearly says, Jesus, I told Joseph this, right? There it is. So if you believe this is a revelation and you believe that the new and everlasting covenant is polygamy, Joseph was told about polygamy, right? And that flies in the face of everything that, some people are trying to say. So that's very damaging, that line right there.
RFM, I apologize. I will be interrupting you maybe a few more times, only because I'm passionate about this one.
No, it's great. Because you and I did the show on this, and you came up with the idea for it, and you took the lead in the research. This is 3 years ago.
Yeah. I will only say, you pointed it to the context. Whatever it is they want to get rid of, that Jesus says, no, you can't get rid of, it has to be controversial. It has to be something that John Taylor is considering getting rid of, that Jesus is putting the brakes on and telling him he can't get rid of it.
Right.
It makes no sense if you define new and everlasting covenant any other way that's been used in church history.
Yes, and this is when new and everlasting covenant started to get broadened. You can tell a change is occurring as a definition goes from being specific to being broadened, okay? And it's usually because of something like this, where the specific definition of the new and everlasting covenant of marriage, which was plural marriage, it was synonymous. That starts having problems with section 132, which is still in your Doctrine and Covenants. So you just start, okay, well, it doesn't specifically mean only plural marriage. It means the whole gospel, all the covenant, including baptism and the sacrament. And so you just make it so broad that the problem goes away. It's the modern Bailey logical fallacy, which I was taught by Colby Reddish. Okay, so we're going to go on from here. Anything else? Okay, so that is the revelation itself. And once again, the church in its history catalog is putting it up there. It's not making any questions about the provenance or who wrote it. It just says it's written by John Taylor, yours and my third president of the church. Now, this one is important, okay? So pay attention, please. This is one of the type copies of the revelation. I mean, you see, when someone receives a revelation, John Taylor writes something down, that's important. And they're out in the middle of nowhere. They can't exactly run to Kinko's. So people will copy it down on paper so that they will have their own copy. And they will do it by hand, or if they got a typewriter, they'll type it up. And then they have their own copy of this revelation. And they can keep it for themselves. They can put it in some file. They can put it in the historian's office, which is, of course, where our good apostle and president of the church, Joseph Fielding Smith, put it. Now, the heading of this, it's a bit faint up there, and that's why I replicated it over here in the left. This is part of the document. Revelation, all caps, given to President John Taylor, September 27th, 1886, copied from the original manuscript by Joseph F. Smith, Jr., August 3rd, 1909. E.g., copied by Joseph Fielding Smith. That's Joseph Fielding Smith. When it says Joseph F. Smith, Jr., that's exactly who that is. He's named after his dad. Okay. Now, I want you to remember that, because that's going to blow up. That's why I have that little emblem there of the person with the time bomb in their head, because that's kind of what's going on over here. He says in 1909 that he copied this by a typewriter. So obviously he had to have seen it to copy it. Nezpa. Now, 1933, the third manifesto is issued. Just when you thought two manifestos weren't enough, there's a third manifesto. It comes out June 17th, 1933. It's an official statement. It's from the first presidency. This is what constituted scriptures in former days. A first presidency statement, which is what this was. And it says, from the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Heber J. Grant is the president at the time. This is very, very lengthy. I'm certainly not going to read the entirety of it. I'm just going to read those portions which I think have to do with our subject tonight. And you can certainly look this up on the internet and read the entire thing yourself. But the first paragraph says, is that too small, Rebecca? Okay. Bill, can you read the first paragraph, the one with the yellow around it?
The first presidency have recently received letters making inquiry concerning the position of the church regarding the contracting of polygamous or plural marriages. It is evident from these letters, as well as from certain published material, some of it distributed during our last general conference, that a secret and, according to reputation, an oath-bound organization of misguided individuals is seeking to lead the people to adopt adulterous relations under the guise of a pretended and false polygamous or plural marriage ceremony.
I love how he says that they're reportedly an oath-bound organization, like, that's a bad thing.
They're not
As
the
if
right
Mormons aren't
oath-bound
oath-bound.
organization. Yeah, they're not the
Okay.
right oath-bound organization.
That's right.
This is right, so it's not adulterous, it's plural marriage, but the
Yeah.
wrong oath-bound organization, and it's adulterous.
Let's
Well, what they
dissect-
don't want to talk about, but they will eventually in order to deny it, is one of the main centerpieces of this huge controversy is this purported revelation that John Taylor said he received. Because if John Taylor receives a revelation in 1886 from Jesus that says, I'm never revoking this, then Wilford Woodruff gets up and says, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Then Wilford Woodruff is the false prophet. The question is at that point, okay, once you set up the dominoes that way, who is the false prophet? Is it Wilford Woodruff for contradicting Jesus? Or is it John Taylor for being the third president and being outlived by Wilford Woodruff? So that Wilford Woodruff becomes the latest word on the subject. That's the question. We know that the LDS Church has gone with Wilford Woodruff, and a lot of other people who continue to practice polygamy went with John Taylor on this. So this becomes obviously a very important piece of evidence for their case. At the October conference of the church in 1890, this is all from this first presidency letter. And it gives a little bit of an outline. And it's very interesting how difficult it was to eradicate this plural marriage. And there's a reason for it. And I don't know that we're going to get into it here. Okay. But we talked about it in other places. At the October conference, 1890, following the publication of the manifesto issued by President Woodruff, the document was read before the assembled congregation, after which Lorenzo Snow, at the time president of the Council of the 12, arose and made the following motion. And I move that we recognize that since we recognize Wilford Woodruff as the president of the church and the only man on earth at the present time who holds the keys of the sealing ordinances, blah, 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 that this manifesto be passed. And the motion was unanimously sustained, according to this. So that's 1890. We all know that. Then 1904, a lot of us know this. In the General Conference of the Church, April 1904, President Joseph F. Smith, who had succeeded President Lorenzo Snow, made the following statement to the assembled congregation. Inasmuch as there are numerous reports in circulation that plural marriages have been entered into, contrary to the official declaration of President Wilford Woodruff of September 24th, 1890, commonly called the Manifesto, which was issued by President Woodruff, adopted by the conference on that date, which forbade any marriage violative of the law of the land, I, Joseph F. Smith, President of the Church, do hereby affirm and declare that no such marriages have been solemnized with the sanction, consent, or knowledge of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If a church can have knowledge. And I hereby announce that all such marriages are prohibited. And if any officer or member of the church shall assume to solemnize or enter into any such marriage, he will be deemed in transgression against the church and will be liable to be dealt with according to the rules and regulations thereof and excommunication therefrom. This is sometimes called the Second Manifesto. So 1890 doesn't do the trick. 1904, there's still people practicing it. We're going to find that some of them are in high places. Then in 1910, Joseph F. Smith and his counselors, the first presidency of the church, addressed a letter to the president of each of the stakes of the church, which contained the full text of the statement made by President Joseph F. Smith that we just read back in 1904. In this letter, the presidents of the stakes were definitely instructed to notify the members of the church in the stakes over which they presided to report any case in which a person had entered into a pretended marriage violative of the civil law or taught others to do so, and to take action against such persons and excommunicate from the church. So they're still trying to root it out, and it's 1910. It's going to go on. Once again, this is the history of this as set forth in this first presidency statement from 1933, the Third Manifesto. It's giving the procedural history. And then again in 1914, they have to send another letter to the presidents of stakes and counselors that says, you know, dear brethren, having reason to believe that some members of the church are secretly engaged, advising and encouraging others to enter into unauthorized and unlawful marriages, we've deemed it advisable to call your attention to the communication we addressed to you on this subject in 1910, 4 years ago, copy of which is herewith appended. You can tell it's not going away easily. And this is 1914. And once again, it's this 1886 revelation that is one of the main reasons that it's not going away. And, you know, there's a story that goes along with it. And Bill, can you tell the folks about what that story is? Because there's like a visitation, wasn't there?
Are you talking about the Woolley experience?
Yeah, that's alleged to happen with John Taylor when he gets this revelation.
Yes. So in 1886, when John Taylor receives this revelation, it's never officially entered into the church. It just sits around. At one point, it's sitting on John Taylor's desk. And because the rest of church leadership doesn't authenticate it, validate it, utilize it, they sort of just ignore it and get as far away from it as they can. And we also know of the 1911 trial of John W. Taylor, son of John Taylor, where John W. Taylor talks about the revelation, presents it perhaps, and there are multiple people in that room who saw it and talk about it. I say all that to say this, which is, as time goes on, it's pretty obvious to those who keep their ears to the ground that this revelation exists. And as the church gets further and further away from polygamy, you end up having people who, Lauren Woolley is the son. Do you remember what the father's name was?
I don't.
Okay. Well, Father Woolley was one of the bodyguards for the prophet. And he almost certainly would have been in the home where this revelation was received. But what goes above and beyond that is Woolley steps forward and he says that he not only was in the home, but he saw a mystical experience happen. He knew that John Taylor, president of the church, was in his room and he was the only one in there. And yet the room filled with light. He could see it from underneath the door. And then he heard two other voices in the room, and one of them being the prophet Joseph Smith, and the other we would know to be Jesus Christ. And Woolley says, how can we get away from polygamy when this experience happened? There's a revelation that exists, and there's no getting away from this. And so by his claiming that this experience, in fact, did occur, and him claiming to be a witness of it, gave all the authority necessary to the fundamentalist to know that they're on the right track and it's their job to keep polygamy going, and that it's the LDS Church that's been dishonest and walked away from God's true path, which I'll just end up saying here that this revelation coming out in a sort of way demonstrates that to their benefit. But it's the Woolley family, Lauren Woolley and his dad, John Woolley, yes, and their claims around what happened in 1886 that gives all the, and again, they're not, even if he didn't experience that, even if he's in the house and he doesn't actually see anything mystical, the basic facts of what he said are true. John Taylor claimed to have a revelation where Jesus spoke to him and told him never to end polygamy. And so Woolley is really only a second witness to the whole thing.
Yeah. Boy, I was going to ask a question, but then I realized what the answer was. I was going to ask the question, how could he tell it was Jesus talking? And then I realized the answer is because he speaks with a Texas accent.
Obviously.
There it is.
They're loving that in Texas tonight, I got to tell you.
See, and I put this event up there with sort of the transfiguration, right? Where there's a story and they sort of embellish, and then they, by the end of the life, when they're telling it over and over, actually believe this happened. So it's one of those things. But all you need are 3 witnesses. So we're almost there.
So here's this whole litany of events that's going on once again, this 1833, this very lengthy first presidency statement. And now it gets to this document, this revelation by John Taylor. And they give it a lot of words here. And I've got a picture of Gerardo Rivera over here. And you can guess what was happening there if you're old enough to remember back the 1980s.
That was the greatest show. I stayed up all night for that. What a disappointment.
That's such a cutie, though. What a doll. Okay, this is still from the first presidency. This is where they start getting fast and loose with the truth. The members of the secret and by reputation oath-bound organization, they're talking about the fundamentalists, referred to in the first paragraph of this statement, make many false allegations. False. 2 of which, and we're just talking about the first one, that has to do with this Revelation 1886. As being those without which all others they make must necessarily fall, may be noted here by way of cautioning the membership of the teachings and practices of this organization. It is alleged that on September 26th to 27th, because it happened at night, 1886, President John Taylor received a revelation from the Lord, the purported text of which is given in publications circulating apparently by or at the instance of this same organization. Purported text of which, by the way, as if he doesn't know. As to this pretended revelation, as if the first presidency in 1933, they're portraying that they don't know, they think it's a pretended revelation. It should be said that the archives of the church contain no such revelation. So they're going to say, we've looked, we've turned over every stone. There's no such revelation. And we don't even think there ever was such a revelation. I'm sorry. I'll read the language here. It should be said that the archives of the church contain no such revelation. And then it repeats it apparently. The archives of the church contain no such revelation. The archives contain no record of any such revelation, nor any evidence justifying a belief that any such revelation was ever given. These are all lies, by the way. From the personal knowledge of some of us, from the uniform and common recollection of the presiding quorums of the church, from the absence in the church archives of any evidence whatsoever justifying any belief that such a revelation was given, we are justified in affirming that no such revelation exists. Wow. You see, they know that this isn't true. This is in the first presidency statement of the church, 1933. And we'll talk a little bit about it because how it is they know it's not true because they're leaving one particular and rather important event out of their timeline. in this 1933 Third Manifesto. I'm going to read this last paragraph, though, before we go to it. Furthermore, the First Presidency 1933 statement says, so far as the authorities of the church are concerned, since this pretended revelation, if ever given, was never presented to and adopted by the church. Oh, yeah, this is the funny part. This is where they say it doesn't exist. But even if it did, it was never adopted by the church by common consent, which is a strange kind of alternative argument to make. I mean, if it doesn't exist, then you don't really need to go to plan B.
RFM, if the second reason is utilized, we never adopted this by common consent. How the hell can you walk away from Jesus showing up in the room and giving a direct revelation? You can't just, well, Jesus, we're just not going to vote on that one. Sorry, buddy. You don't really get a say on this one.
It's true. It's true. But we all know it's got to be, we all got to raise our hands, right, in order for it to be considered binding, be canonical, authoritative, binding upon the church. But the other thing is, that is the second question, right? That would be the natural follow-up question. So are you saying then that Jesus lied about it when he said this to John Taylor? Well, no, I'm not saying that. So you're saying it was the truth. Well, yeah, it's Jesus. He's going to tell her the truth. Okay, so isn't that the truth regardless of whether people vote about it?
Not in Mormonism. And we talked about this right before the show, RFM, how a Mormon God is kind of a weak God because no matter what he says or puts out there, it still has to be ratified, codified by 15, I like to call them 15 angry men, right? All sitting around fighting at a table. And if they can't come to a consensus, then God's word is out the window. So what kind of a God is that? If you're completely beholding to man, it's a very interesting setup, the way they have it. And also, I mean, if everyone really believes that God is speaking directly to the prophet, I think that the discussion should stop there, right? If they really believe it, there is no discussion. God told the prophet, of course, everyone's on board. So it's
Well,
handled
yes, it
more like
shouldn't.
a corporate boardroom, isn't it? And God's just waiting. Oh, I hope they vote for me.
I know.
Not really
God,
that way in the rest of Christianity.
God is subject to the quorum of the
That's it.
15.
That's
You
it.
see, this is when the real doctrine happens, where the rubber hits the road in the Mormon church. And when you actually analyze what they say, you realize that the top 15 are above God. God cannot give a revelation without their consent.
I mean, look at the lifting of the priesthood ban. The prophet had to secretly arrange for 2 of those, 12 angry men to be in the hospital or sent away so that he could sneak past God's word. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been enacted. What kind of God is that?
What is going on in this picture? It's a little bit monkeyed with, but can you tell the audience, Rebecca?
Yeah, it's Al Capone's vault. Isn't that right? Yeah, I stayed up late to watch that. It was this big deal. Gerardo Rivera, is this before or after he got punched in the nose? I can't remember, but huge deal. They discovered the vault. They were going to open it on live TV. They had this huge special showing everything about Al Capone, and he went in there and he opened it.
There's nothing there. There's no 1886 revelation. Is it?
No,
There's none. There's
empty.
nothing in there. We looked in the archives. Now, this once again is the First Presidency speaking in 1933. Have I drilled that in enough? Because one of the things that they're leaving out, oh, by the way, this is at the very end, where it's signed by Heber J. Grant, the president of the church, Anthony Ivins, and J. Reuben Clark, the counselors of the First Presidency, all right? So that was June of 1933. And remember, it's June because July something's going to happen that's interesting. Okay, so one thing was omitted from the 1933 timeline. And I want to say at this point that when Bill led our research on this this particular episode, Revelation, Excommunications, Lies, and Obfuscations, the 1886 John Taylor divination, that's episode 42. It's over 3 years ago. 35,000 views. Wow. Amazing. That's good. But I wanted to say that we came to the conclusion based upon the evidence that this is exactly what the church was doing, that the church had lied about knowing that this document, this revelation did exist and that they had possession of it. But now, for whatever reason, the church has very quietly put it out there to prove that they actually do have possession of it, that they've had it all along, and that they were not telling the truth back in 1933. And every day, week, month, and year that's gone by since then, which is almost 100 years, they have compounded the lie by not rectifying it, by not clarifying it, by not saying the truth, and just trying to leak it out here and not have anybody notice. It's kind of like when they put the 1832 account of the first vision back in letter book 1 and then had someone else sort of find it. They don't make any announcements about this. They don't really want people to know about it. So that was good. Here's the trial. This is what they didn't tell you. 1911, and we've got the minutes, and I'm not going to read them all, and they're very long, but I'm just going to read a couple, okay? This is the minutes of the meeting of the 12 apostles held in the Salt Lake Temple, February 22nd, 1911, 10 o'clock in the morning, at which were present President Francis M. Lyman, that'd be the president of the Quorum of the 12, Heber J. Grant, Hiram M. Smith, Charles Penrose, George Richards, Orson Whitney, David O. McKay, Anthony Ivins, and Joseph F. Smith Jr. Once again, that's Joseph Fielding Smith. He is the new kid on the block in 1911. Also by request, John W. Taylor, in answer to the following summons, because he was summoned then about his membership in the church on account of they think that he is continuing to practice polygamy. He had voluntarily resigned his position in the Quorum of 12 earlier, some years earlier, because he still believed that polygamy was the correct thing. I mean, his dad's the one who got the revelation in 1886, right? So he parts ways, I'd say pretty darn amicably, along with another apostle. I think it was Matthias Cowley. But anyway, now the apostles think that he is out there and he's part of what's going on, and that they're trying to extirpate. They're trying to drive it out. They're trying to catch everybody. And they think that maybe John W. Taylor is one of these guys who's out there and making things bad. And the reason that the church is really in a bad spot is because they've already made promises to the U.S. government, and they've kind of become a state based on those promises. And the main promise was, we really mean it. We're not going to be doing polygamy anymore. So they got to become a state. They got all these benefits. And of course, when they became a state, it had to be written and was written into the Utah State Constitution. There will never be polygamy or plural marriage in Utah. And as far as I know, it's still there. So this was the excommunication. This was the court of love for John W. Taylor. And John W. Taylor says this during the course of this meeting. I do not want to discuss my own case. It is up to you and the brethren to pass upon that. I am living among the Philistines, and you brethren are among the Mormons. There is one thing that is much more serious in my mind than polygamy, and I am not mentioning it to aid me in my case at all. When the Enabling Act was passed, there were two things that we promised. One thing was that polygamy would be stopped, and the other, that church influence would not be used in politics. Well, at least they stopped polygamy for the most part. My father, John W. Taylor says, my father, he's talking about the third president of the church. My father received a revelation which, however, was never presented to the church. And I refer to this not because it is a revelation to my father. I don't think a revelation because it came through him was any greater than one received through any other president of the church. But because it seems to pertain to this question, the revelation follows, and there it is, and we've already read it. So he pulls out the revelation, and he puts it down, and it is read. By the way, it's not like the people in this audience have never heard of this revelation before. They know about it. And this is the end of it. Even so, amen. That's the end of the revelation. The revelation was read by Brother Penrose, so he read it out loud. Now, here's a few snippets of the questions. C.W. Penrose, that's a picture of him there, I believe. Do you understand the free agency referred to in the revelation gives anyone the privilege of taking a plural wife? I don't want to get into this too much here, but going back to where it was that we had the actual transcript of this, there it was. Number 4, paragraph 4. And furthermore, it is more pleasing to me that men should use their free agency in regard to these matters. That is a hugely important sentence in this, because what it may reflect is the idea that was being enacted at the time by John Taylor, which was to have polygamy continue in the church, but to arrange it in such a way as that the church was not responsible for it, that it wasn't happening with the sanction of the church. And they would set it up for others to go and do it instead, but leave the church out of it. And I think that their idea was, this way we can still keep our word to the United States, but not violate what we think is a commandment from God. The problem is that it worked, and it worked too well, because they separated the practice of polygamy from the church, which means they gave away the keys. And then when they wanted to get them back, the people said, sorry, we got the keys now, and you can't have them back. You gave them to us. And actually, it's not you anymore. It's your predecessor who gave us the keys. And now you want them back? No, because you're an apostate, because you gave up on the one principle and the principle of plural marriage that Jesus said, no, never give it.
Can I make a comment about the
Yeah.
AUB, the Apostolic United Brethren? They are a polygamist offshoot, fundamentalist, and I'm friends with one of their polygamous princesses. And she explained almost exactly what you said, that in her family, her grandfather was Reuel Allred. And he always said, we hold the keys of polygamy. We are holding that practice. The mainstream church is holding temple ordinances. He would even encourage, his members would become part of LDS wards for a time so that they could go there and then have their temple work, their ordinances, and then come back to. So he saw it as these two sort of branches and pieces that eventually someday would come back together, but they were each holding their own piece. I thought that was so interesting. And how you just explained it, it makes it even more clear, I think.
There's got to be a hot time in Colorado City tonight.
No joke.
I mean, how would you feel if you're one of these people who believe that the church is in apostasy because they didn't honor this revelation and then they lied? Well, let me just say they denied having it. We don't have it. We don't know. We never saw it. And in fact, we don't even think it ever existed. And now they publish it. They had it all along. There's a story behind all this that I don't know, but this has been going on a while. And it's continuing to go on. And I don't know what discussions have been going back and forth, if any. But I think there's a story behind the story.
I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but I think I want to drive the point home. First you said they lied, and then you're wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt and go, well, at the very minimum, they denied having this thing. So they could be unaware, right? The revelation could be in the records and none of them remember.
No. I wasn't giving them an out, just so you know. No, I said they denied having the records, and then they proved now that they were lying because they had it all along.
Yeah, and I'll just, again, I maybe you were going to say this, but we know they're lying because 5 of the people who are part of that 1933 first presidency and Quorum of the 12 are Heber J. Grant, A.W. Ivins, David O. McKay, Joseph Fielding Smith, and I'm missing one, George Albert Smith. That's who it is. Those 5 were also present at the 1911 trial of John W. Taylor, and hence maybe one of them could have forgotten. Having 5 of them forget probably the most important disciplinary court they were at in their entire life, that revelation was pulled out, read to them, that's absurd.
Well, I think they were lying in 1933. Obviously, you don't forget something that happened, just a decade ago.
Yeah.
But I still, in my conspiracy-minded brain, think perhaps, 100 years later, they did not realize this was in the vaults. I have a theory that maybe this was released by accident. I know
you do, and I'm dying to hear that. All I can say is I don't know. It showed up, whether it was planned, and I know that you think maybe it was an accident, which would be different than my idea that there's got to be a story behind this. If it was an accident, there's no story except for a massive cluster. Go ahead, tell us what you think.
No, I just like to explore all theories. And I have the conspiracy theory that the tank top garment was released by accident, never meant to have this widespread. So I think about how these documents, there must be thousands of them, right, in the archives. And I did this when I worked at BYU. I was a cataloger. I would have a stack of things. I would have to pick it up, look at it, type in the keywords. This is a revelation by da da da. Here's the page numbers here. It was just simply passing through and being processed, right? Scan, 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 throw it up there, right? Could it be possible that it was just, really forgotten in time and it was simply processed as part of their cataloging as they're moving documents through, trying to make everything available? And the person, I kind of picture it like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? Ring that bell. She's got the 86 revelation. Maybe that never happened. Maybe it was just put online by somebody that wasn't aware of the extraordinary historical significance. This would explain why the church, never said anything. Now we know they do put things out. They put out essays and things, but this isn't putting something out that they've created. This is finding something from the past. So I don't know. It's one way to look at it. Of course, there's another way to look at it, and that is the polygamy cartoon, some other factors. Maybe they're leading us towards something. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to think about it.
This would be one of the biggest mistakes in the history of big mistakes. And yet we all acknowledge that big mistakes can happen. Sometimes they do. In rare circumstances, I even told you that I think that one piece of evidence favors your theory, which is that there seems to be no equivocation at all about the provenance of this revelation.
Exactly.
Just written by John Taylor. The person who's writing that doesn't have a care in the world about the controversial nature of this.
If you are cataloging information, that's why I kind of did that little you're typing. Okay, it says Revelation, John 10, it simply states what's there, right? There's no wiggle words. There's nothing else on it. With something this big, there should be something else explaining it. So it'll be interesting to see if the church comes out with something now after the fact. Again, this is just a hypothetical theory, but knowing how processing documents works when you're trying to throw things up into an online archive, if it really was lost, it could just be moved on through. So I don't know. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just throwing a lot of stuff out there.
All right. Well, C.W. Penrose did ask, and I started this by going back to talk about the free agency clause in this revelation. So Apostle Penrose asks, do you understand the free agency referred to in the revelation gives anyone the privilege of taking a plural wife? J.W. Taylor says, I take it that it refers to the individual and relieved the church of the responsibility and placed the responsibility upon the individual. It sure sounds like that's what it's talking about. President Lyman now asks, when did you find this revelation? And J.W. Taylor says, I found it on his desk immediately after his death when I was appointed administrator of his estate. Okay. Now, minutes of a meeting of the Council of the 12. That was the first one, by the way. That was the first meeting. Then they adjourned and they came back and they had a few more questions for our hero, John W. Taylor, based a lot on them talking about the answers he gave to the first set of questions in the first meeting. And all these guys are present again. This is March 1st, 1911. The first one was February 22nd, I believe. And it continues with more questions and answers, but now we get some great information. Charles Penrose asks, what are your views with regard to that revelation? John W. Taylor says, I am not the one to pass upon that revelation. It's not up to me to judge. I think you are the ones to do that. Charles Penrose says, what I desire to get at is as to how you view the matter, whether you have been guided by that in your case. You brought the revelation to us, and it has never been accepted by the church or presented to it. John W. Taylor says, I think the only thing to do is to go to the presiding priesthood of the Lord, he's talking about the president, and get his idea on it and get him to inquire of the Lord what his mind is regarding it. And Charles Penrose says, I don't think Brother Taylor should come here and tell us what we need to do. Oh, yeah. John W. Taylor, he's getting a bit cheeky there, telling him, well, you got a prophet at the head of the church. Why don't you just go down the hallway and ask him to inquire about it so we can get the will of God about it? And Charles Penrose says, oh, that's cheeky. That's a great exchange. Okay. You recognize the symbol here at the bottom left? This is the brain explosion, the time bomb. Okay. Anthony Ivins asks, do you know how extensively this revelation, it's all about the 1886 revelation, has been circulated in times past and has guided people in their actions in this regard. John W. Taylor says, Brother Joseph Robinson came to me and asked for a copy of it upon the suggestion of Brother Cowley. That would be, I think, Matthias Cowley, the other apostle. And he got it from Brother Badger. Brother Joseph F. Smith Jr. Once again, who is that? Joseph Fielding Smith. John W. Taylor says Brother Joseph Fielding Smith also got a copy, but I don't know how many have got copies from these. And later on, in the same meeting, Joseph Fielding Smith Jr., Joseph Fielding Smith says, it is true I obtained a copy of this revelation from Brother Rodney Badger. He let me take the original, and I made a copy and filed it in the historian's office. Geez, you think that might be in the archives. This is 1911. Joseph Fielding Smith takes a copy and he files it in the historian's office. By 1933, which is 22 years later, I believe they're going to be denying this even exists and saying it doesn't exist in the archives, and they searched thoroughly. That's why I say I think they're kind of caught off first base on this one. Remember, this was the revelation that was given to President John Taylor. This is a duplicate of a slide I had on before, because now we have it. In those minutes from the 1911 meeting, we know that Joseph Fielding Smith said, I obtained a copy of this revelation. And now, there it is. That's what he was talking about. From 2 years earlier in 1909, August 3rd. When he typed out the revelation. So now we have the revelation that he was talking about in the minutes of that meeting. And here in the 1833, the third manifesto, it's actually 1933. This is a duplicate slide as well. And I was repeating all the things that they were saying. Remember, in 1933, in the third manifesto by the first presidency, this is what they said about this revelation that they talked about in the minutes of the 1911 excommunication hearing for John W. Taylor. They say, as to this pretended revelation, it should be said that the archives of the church contain no such revelation. The archives contain no record of any such revelation, nor any evidence justifying a belief that any such revelation was ever given. No further questions, Your Honor. Bill, yes?
There are more lies in that sentence you just read. There's at least 3 just in that sentence that you're just block of words you just said. One, that it didn't exist. One, that it's not at the church. There never was such a liar, liar, pants on fire, over and over again. That's all these guys do. When they're running their mouth, they're lying. When their lips are moving, they're lying.
Do you want to say anything about this, Rebecca?
No, sorry, I was researching on my phone the Stephen Smoot releasing it, trying to figure that out. So
Stephen Smoot is releasing something?
There's somebody in the audience is claiming that Smoot is responsible for this being released.
I'd love to hear more about that, because he did release the uncanonized revelations of Joseph Smith, of course, and he's connected to the Interpreter Association, our foundation. So yeah, I'd like to see how he's connected to be able to release something on the church's website. That would be interesting.
So that would have been intentionally then? That
would be intentional. Yeah. Saying that my theory, that's not going to be correct. Although I will say in the chat,
the guy who made the mistake.
Huh?
He might be the guy who made the mistake. If anybody's going to cock it up, it'd be Stephen Smoot.
It could be, but Rob Lauer also made the comment in the chat that given the caliber of the historians today, they're all lawyers, and the ignorance of leadership on church history, 100 years later, from what we're talking about here, they honestly may not be aware that even exists.
There's an old saying among defense attorneys: never underestimate the state's ability to up a case. And here, this is some of the minutes from that second meeting, right? Okay. And they end up excommunicating him. 28th day of March, the council convened, further considered the case of Brother Taylor. And today, by unanimous vote of the Council of the 12 Apostles, it was decided that he is hereby excommunicated from the church for insubordination to the government and discipline of the church. Signed by Francis M. Lyman.
Only honest guy in the room. When you read that, you can sense his integrity. He doesn't want to throw anyone under the bus. He wants to take the fall. He wants to let the apostles off easy. And he's the one honest guy in the room, and he gets punished.
Mm-hmm. Fate is a cruel mistress. Oh, but wait, there's more. On this time bomb. The time bomb is really what we've already talked about. This is just sort of an aperitif or something after the meal, perhaps a mint on the pillow. What we have as document 17 out of 28 is a declaration by J. Reuben Clark. There he is on the right, and here it is. And what it says, let me see here. I think that, nope, I have to read it from this, all right? Because what he's going to do is he is going to give us the provenance of the actual original revelation. What he says is, it's July 18th, 1933. So this is the next month, right? The next month after the third manifesto was issued. This paper came into the possession of the first presidency in the following manner. After the issuance of the official statement of June 17th, 1933 by the first presidency, that's the third manifesto, covering the matter of pretended polygamous or plural marriages, President Ivins stated to President Grant, and let me see if I can just get a little bit, where's this? Let me see, that might be just a little bit better. So President Ivins stated to President Grant and Clark that a report had come to him that Sister Nellie Taylor, I think that's the typewriter, one of the plural wives of John W. Taylor, was affirming that she had found among the papers of her husband, John W. Taylor, after his death, a paper on which was something written in the handwriting of President John Taylor. Sister Taylor stated that she had turned over this paper to Brother Frank Y. Taylor, so she doesn't have it anymore. So they go and get Frank Y. Taylor. President Grant spoke to Frank Y. Taylor about the matter, and the latter, i.e. Frank Y. Taylor, stated that he had no recollection of ever having even the paper, but that if such a paper existed and had been given to him, he could easily find it, as he knows just where he would have put it. So I guess it's wherever he puts his important papers. So about July 18th, 1933, Frank Y. Taylor brought to President Grant the attached paper. Let me see here. Something paper in the envelope which is attached to this paper. Okay. Encased. I think it's encased in the envelope which is attached to this paper. All right. So that's the provenance of how we got this original handwritten revelation by John Taylor from 1866. And then the date written on the back of the second page of the revelation is the date of President John Taylor's death, and was written by President Grant on July 17th, 1933. And there it is. So I don't know what President Grant would have meant by writing John Taylor's death date on the back of the second page of the original revelation in his own handwriting. I guess that will have to lead to speculation. All right. Well, I don't know what's going on. All I know is this, is that in October 2013, the Silver Fox gave a memorable conference talk in which he said, among other things, the following.
A question that creates doubt in some can, after careful investigation, build faith in others. And to be perfectly frank, there have been times when members or leaders in the church have simply made mistakes. There may have been things said or done that were not in harmony with our values, principles, or doctrine.
So that happens in October 2013 General Conference. What happens 2 months later? Get the Race in the Priesthood essay dropped on the LDS Church's website. Was what President Uchtdorf at the time, is what he was saying, was that laying the groundwork for this essay? Some have speculated that that might be the case. I don't know, but I do know that not last conference, but the conference before, we had a special message from President Dallin H. Oaks in a talk about following Christ. This is October 2024. And in that, he added to the lexicon of Mormon theology.
The Lord's commandments are of two types: permanent, like the doctrine of Christ, and temporary. Temporary commandments are those necessary for the needs of the Lord's church or the faithful in temporary circumstances, but to be set aside when the need has passed. An example of temporary commandments are the Lord's directions to the early leadership of the church to move the saints from New York to Ohio, to Missouri, to Illinois, and finally to lead the pioneer exodus to the Intermountain West. Though only temporary, when still in force, these commandments were given to be obeyed.
Now, he studiously avoided mentioning the obvious temporary commandment of plural marriage, and that was commented on at the time. And then the thought occurs to some that was what he said there supposed to be preparing the way for the ultimate release of this particular revelation. What are your thoughts about that, Rebecca?
I just messaged Bill something. It was an answer to the Stephen Smoot involvement, which is very interesting. And you're right. The other side of it is preparing us for something that's coming. We have a polygamy cartoon released. We have this revelation released. We have a tremendous church growth in Africa, where there are many people living in polygamous relationships. I don't know. Things are a-changing. But if Bill can find that on Messenger.
Is it you put it on Facebook Messenger to me?
Yeah, I just sent it to you on Messenger.
Sweet.
I can also just read it if you can. But
I can grab it. Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
If you want to put it up, see, this proves it's a live program, folks. Somebody in the chat says something, I say, what? They message me, and we all get to hear about it.
What is the source?
Okay, so here we go. So this is Stephen Smoot describing what happened. Could someone read that? It's small for me on the screen. RFM, maybe you want to.
It says, check out the latest from Mormon R. Now, that's a critical site. Is that right?
Not critical.
No?
It skews more faithful, kind of.
It does?
It has good information, I think.
Okay, so check out the latest from Mormon R on an important John Taylor revelation that has just been publicly released for the first time. It's been a privilege to work on this topic with the B.H. Roberts Foundation and to help spark its digitization by inquiring about the document through the Church History Department. After nearly 2 years of anticipation, I finally saw the scan of the original document in Taylor's own handwriting this morning. This is 2 days ago, apparently.
Yeah.
This is live right now. I mean, this is being pulled up, accessed right now.
Well, the person in the chat sent it to me saying, they referenced it for us.
Okay, well, it says 2 days, but at least 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days at a minimum. Okay.
So
after nearly, I finally saw the scan of the original document in Taylor's own handwriting this morning on the CHL, Church History Library, catalog website. It was remarkable to see at last. It's especially rewarding to see this article now online. Okay, so is that like, I don't know, the article he wrote or something?
No, well, see, it makes it sound now, and I told you that he has published books about the uncanonized revelations of Joseph Smith. So working with the B.H. Roberts Foundation, it sounds like he also is looking into other uncanonized revelations and perhaps inquiring from the Church History Department, hey, do we have this? Can we look for this? Is this somewhere? And then there it is. But again, it's so important. It just seems like the church would weigh in some way when they were going to put it out if they meant to do it. So I don't know. I'd like to know. I think the story of how it's released is as important as what it is almost, because it means it can really tell us what's going on.
I can't tell if Stephen Smoot really wants to get credit for this. What do you think?
I don't know. It's a little second party. So, but I do have two comments just on the revelation itself. My first one, maybe only one comment is that I read it, and I've talked before about growing up and being really triggered by polygamy. Again, I was always agnostic, but I was raised in a household where polygamy was very much a part of it. We had the picture of the striped ancestors like on our wall. We were very proud of it. We talked about it.
Prison
I always
clothes.
knew, huh?
They were in prison clothes.
Yes, prison clothes.
And the
Exactly.
prison clothes were
Because we were
striped.
so proud of our polygamist heritage. And I always knew, my family let me know that that was my future. That was any woman's future. And I would get really upset when I was a teenager once I really realized what that meant, and I had cried over it. Even though I knew I didn't believe it, I knew everyone around me believed it. And it was so just unfair, and I had those feelings again as I was transcribing and reading this. I'm like, God, Jesus and God, how he feels about his daughters of God. I mean, we just can't win. This is our fate. This is it. It's done. It's polygamy for us. And this is how he feels about us, our future, and just all the horrors of that. Men are trapped too, but I read it from a woman's perspective. And I'm just like, this is horrible. This is just a horrible revelation for women yet again. So I had kind of this reaction like 15-year-old me when I read it. So
That's why you said no
yeah.
when I asked if you would read it, because of that reaction, right?
No, also I have I have a big screen, but for some reason StreamYard shows up really small, and I'm, but no, I would have read it. But I did have initially that reaction. I felt like I was 15 again, just going, why? Why are we treated this way in these revelations? Why?
And what is the answer you've come to?
Well, I don't believe, and it's not real, so I'm okay. And it's a man's world. I think that's probably why you're treated that way, and it's systemic, 2 centuries worth of it. But there are people now that believe it. There are people that are affected by believing that is their future. That is the next life. And those are the people that I'm upset for because they're still living in it.
Bill?
All day today, I've been feeling a lot. I was talking to my girlfriend. We were sitting in a line in our car in a fast food line. And I looked over and I said, I'm always on the verge of being overwhelmed by some emotion in me, because I'll say it this way. The most concrete way to lead someone astray. Remember, the church says that the prophet will never lead the church astray. The most concrete way you can lead, and you do lead people astray, is to lie to them. Anytime you lie to people to cover your ass, you are leading those people you lie to astray. The church, and by the church, I always mean, when I'm criticizing it, its top 15 leaders. Its top 15 leaders swore they would never lead the church astray, but they not only led the church astray by lying, and if anyone wants to make the argument that lying as many times as these guys had is not leading anyone astray, that's ridiculous. It's the easiest, most concrete way to lead people astray is to lie to them. Not only did they lead the entire church membership astray, they led the fundamentalists astray by creating a false argument that everyone knew was bullshit. Excuse my language on the newscast. They set it up so that all the fundamentalists could just believe harder in their actual belief by telling people there was no revelation. We don't have it. John W. Taylor's lying. Everyone out there's lying. You actually gave more room for the fundamentalists to believe stronger that their beliefs were right, and it was the LDS Church was wrong because they're lying to us. Not only did you lead the LDS Church membership astray, not only did you lead the fundamentalist membership astray, but you led the entire world astray by lying over and over and over again. LDS leaders are the least trustable people on the planet, in my mind, because of how much they lie over and over from generation to generation. 15 men working together to lie to you every day. How does anyone who knows the history of the church truly supposed to make peace with that? How is, again, I know there are believers out there who know the problems, but then by justifying it, you become part of the problem. How can good, honest people with integrity ever reconcile any of this mess when you lie to them over and over again, collectively, from generation to generation for 200 years.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about the relationship between leading astray and lying. I would agree with you. I would add that the very purpose, the essential foundational purpose for lying is to lead someone astray.
And clearly what they did here, they didn't want to give the fundamentalists a leg to stand on, so they lie. But by lying, you actually gave the fundamentalists a leg to stand on.
And you make all the members of your church look at you and question your honesty about everything else you tell them. Well, there were a couple more things here on this. Oh, by the way, for Stephen Smoot, to whatever extent that you were involved in this, congratulations. Good job. I think that was important that it happened. Be interested in hearing your whole story at some point. So this is what happens, right? We had just played Following Christ and the talk about the temporary commandments, and then we get a new entry to the church history catalog. And if Stephen Smoot's telling the truth, and I've got no reason to disbelieve him about this, at least, it's been going on for a couple years now that this has been in the works. So let's end with that synopsis again. If it didn't make sense before, it should now. 1886, John Taylor, third president of the church, receives a revelation that God will not, indeed cannot, revoke the command to practice plural marriage. 1890, Wilford Woodruff, fourth president of the church, issues the manifesto revoking the command to practice plural marriage. 1911, John W. Taylor, excommunication hearing by the Quorum of the 12, presents the revelation of his father. And Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith admits to having made a copy of the revelation in 1909, and now we've seen it, and we have it, and placed it in the historian's office. 1933, the church issues the third manifesto, a first presidency statement, claiming the Taylor revelation is not in the archives of the church and never even existed. In 2025, in the last few days, the church quietly released the Taylor revelation on the church history catalog, which revelation the church has possessed the entire time. And that's the name of that tune.
Do you think the church will make a statement about this at all, or just let all of us continue to talk and speculate?
It depends. They'll couch their response to what happens. And right now, I don't know if this is big enough.
Mm-hmm.
I understand some other people were talking about it earlier today on some other podcast. Can't recall the name right now. But you know, if the Trib picks it up, if it gets in the media, if it starts getting legs, then yeah, I expect that they'll issue some kind of response. And it'll be the same kind of response as was issued in the third manifesto. They'll completely overlook the fact. They won't even address the fact that the first presidency of the LDS Church in the Quorum of the 12, they got caught in this massive lie. And that's what, it's not just what this shows, because we already showed that before, right, Bill, before we had the document. This is the exhibit. This is the cherry on top.
Well, I sent it to the Trib, so we'll see.
You did, really?
Of course.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
We'll see if they cover it. It'd be a great story for the Trib to cover.
Would you get your own byline?
Several days ago. Yeah.
You haven't heard anything back?
No.
Okay, they're busy.
It'll just pop up in the news at some point. Probably.
Well, good. I'm glad you did that. And that's the end of the story. And back to you, Bill.
Anything else, Rebecca, on this? RFM, any last words you want to say on this topic?
No, I had no idea that was going to be so long, and I apologize.
It's really important.
I will just say we covered this in the episode we did RFM, but I think at least bears saying here. This was so demonstrable that the church had lied, that its leaders had lied, that even Brian Hales in his write-up article on the John Taylor 1886 revelation says the question arises as to how history might have unfolded if LDS leaders in the early decades of the 20th century had simply admitted the existence of the revelation and classified it with other documents to similar origins.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Brian Hales is telling you the leaders are lying, you know the evidence is overwhelming.
Great job. Amazing. That slide, that was in that show we did over 3 years ago, wasn't it?
It was.
And you remembered it. You're amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go here to this. Just a little fun stories from the Salt Lake Tribune. Latest from Mormon land. Who belongs on an LDS Mount Rushmore? Cast your vote, they say. I found it super interesting that they limited who you could cast your vote for. There wasn't any write-in option, because you could see how that could go haywire. So they gave you a list of people. And of course, they've got Joseph Smith and Brigham Young on there. And I would say any Mount Rushmore that's themed LDS would need to have Joseph Smith and Brigham Young on it. I agree. But who do you fill those other 2 spots with, RFM?
So they basically just went through all the that's just all the church presidents.
I thought, on one hand, I thought it'd be interesting if Gordon B. Hinckley and Russell Nelson were next to each other so they could bicker at each other for all time and eternity. I thought that might be interesting. I thought, of all these other ones, when you read a book on the teachings of the presidents of the church or their biographies, there's an old blue book that would have the history of the presidents of the church. And every church president was like 3 or 4 pages because there's really nothing special about most of them.
Right. They're pitching the baseball against the side of a barn.
They learned better handwriting. Yes. I don't know if that was George Albert Smith or who that was.
Heber J.
Heber J. Graham.
I thought it was he.
But they only gave you a certain group of people you could vote for. They didn't want it to be anybody else. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if it was Radio Free Mormon?
Yes.
And John Dehlin on Mount Rushmore. I think that would at least add some integrity to the mount and to the faces that are on it. So I thought that would be kind of cool.
I think it should be Rebecca Biblioteca.
We need to add Bill in there. There can be 3.
Yeah, Bill. Sorry, Brigham, you're gone. Bill, you're in.
You could add Lindsay Hansen Park long before you add me. Eugene England, Sterling McMurray, maybe. There's lots of names that could go on there, but I thought that would be cool. Radio Free Mormon and John Dehlin. So that was just a little tidbit story in the Salt Lake Tribune. We can turn it over to this story. Cook contrite over LDS Temple process. This isn't Elder Cook. This is Barry Cook.
Yeah.
And this is your story, Rebecca?
Yep, this has to do with temples. And again, 2 very upsetting stories for me today. The revelation and the final results on the Cody Temple decisions. So I'm trying to hold it together, but it's been I'm putting these slides together. It's been rough. So this is interesting. This came out before the Cody, Wyoming Temple decision. So this is the city administrator, Barry Cook. There he is with some kind of, looks like chocolate and caramel sauce at a party. And the headline of the article says, the Cody city administrator will retire after 45 years of public service and 11 years with the city at the end of June. So he's been there a long time. When saying that he was proud of his life's work and his ability to build collaborative, effective teams, Cook said he wishes, okay, keep in mind, this is after 45 years of public service. The one thing he wishes is that he had taken a more aggressive approach to the permitting of the LDS Temple. This is the black mark to him. This is his regret after 45 years of public service. And in retrospect, the city administrator said he should have asked the former city planner to recuse himself from the permitting process. Yes, he should have. Sorry, I'm probably going to yell through this whole thing. But again, this is the scenario of the inside man. No normal person in a town or city government can imagine that there's somebody in their ranks who has a higher allegiance and has actually taken an oath to further the interests of something else other than the town, right? Mm-hmm. We saw this with Mitt Romney when he was running for president, and people question that. When you have somebody who has taken an oath, who is LDS in city government, there is this scenario where they are working to further the purposes of the church. And we saw this in Cody. And this is why everything went so badly in Cody. The city planner was a very trusted individual. He was giving information to the planning and zoning board. And because of this manipulation, alleged, this is why we're in the situation we are here. So he goes on to say in the article, the highs and the lows, with the exception of a few issues over the 11 years he had lived and worked in Cody, Cook says his experience had gone well. One thing he wishes he had handled differently, okay, I already read that, was the permitting of the temple. It was in the realm of the planning and zoning board, but applying for a variance, knowing the former city planner, processing that variance and running it through the system was a Mormon by his religion, I knew there was going to be a perceived conflict of interest between him and the issue. Cook recalled, it was not perceived. It was real, allegedly. I talked to him at the very beginning and I told him, you are going to have to be very careful in how you present this. He assured me that he would remain neutral and not be biased. said Cook. He assured me, but after the process got going and at the tail end, I could see very clearly that he was very biased. Hindsight, right? 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, this is so frustrating. And of course, we now know that that city planner did resign and is on an LDS mission to Africa. So we talked about that on the newscast several months ago.
I trusted the Mormon that he wouldn't be biased in favor of
Yes.
his church.
Yes, that's what I mean. But no normal people, no normal person can understand the sleeper cell quality when you are called up, right? You're called up to the big show. It's your turn to do something for the church.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to do it. Cook said he felt a little betrayed with one of his department heads failing to remain impartial. Where have we heard this before? We've heard this in Fairview, where the mayor said he was very betrayed by the LDS members in the area that knew that temple was coming, knew how big it was, knew what it would mean, and never said anything because, they were the ones that invited the temple there. So, people are starting to catch on. Hindsight is 2020, he added, but if given the opportunity to do it over again, he would have removed the planner up front. So we would have had a very different outcome had that happened. Knowing now that even though he said he was going to remain neutral, he couldn't. I would have removed him. The perception was always going to be there, but I look back and kind of regret not taking a more aggressive role as far as disqualifying the city planner, he said. By taking his word for it and believing he would remain neutral when he didn't, I'm disappointed. It split the community and it still lingers here. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Cook said he also wishes the LDS Church and the community had been able to come to a better resolution on the subject of the steeple. In Tucson, Cook says there's a temple with a rounded dome. A lot of people bring this up, beautiful blue dome, and wishes that design could have been considered in Cody. So this article comes out about this gentleman's retirement and how, looking back, he can see kind of step by step what happened, that someone within city government was working for the interests of someone else and not the city government. So interesting. Hindsight's 2020. There's nothing he can do. Any quick comments on that?
Yeah, like my creative writing teacher, Mrs. Randall, said in 11th grade, if wishes were fishes, we'd all have a fry.
That's it, exactly. And I'm not going to have you play this video, Bill, because it was just me. I got the decision from the Wyoming Supreme Court. The residents group there in Cody had gone through the district court. It hadn't gone their way. They had appealed to the Supreme Court. Their case was heard. RFM and I listened to that. It was on audio, and they were waiting for the decision, and it finally came back. So I got the decision. I made this short about it. It's so funny. People are like, well, where's the article? I'm like, there is no article. I'm the news. I'm the one that has it. Exactly. So the decision, of course, is that they agreed with the district court. And so you don't need to play this video because that's basically all I say. And agreed that, yes, the temple was passed by the P&Z board. And I'm going to have RFM weigh in just a second because I had him read the decision. But I would like to say that Cody has been a 2-year process. Mormonish podcast had barely just started when, through a viewer, some of those residents reached out to us and asked if we could help them kind of understand, what is this LDS Church organization? What is happening here? And within the very first 2 months, that temple was approved, and no one knew it was approved. There were more meetings, there were more things going on. And this is what I mean by information from the city planner and the city attorney. They're the ones that tell the planning and zoning board what you're voting on. Okay, you're just voting on that they can build a temple, not the height or any specifics, just that they can build, right? Planning and zoning board, very confused, voted. They did not realize that within 2 months of the LDS Church first showing its rendering, they were voting on everything. They were saying yes to the height of the steeple. They're saying yes to the lighting. Because of this, you saw in Fairview how they're able to negotiate. We want this lighting, or we want this, or what about that? Cody never had a chance to do that because according to the district court and the Supreme Court, the temple was passed, the CUP with every single thing that the church wanted was passed only 2 months into the process. And yet it went on for another 2 years because no one understood that it passed. And the reason that happens is when they're getting information and they're being confused by the inside man. So this is how it stands. I have talked to the residents and they say they support the decision. They're good, law-abiding, church-going people. And they said, we gave it what we could. We gave it 2 years. and we've done what we could, and now we support it. But again, this temple it's well underway. I've posted pictures about how bright the lights are. It's like a little city. They're just building and building. And Cody never had a chance like Fairview to try to say, well, let's do this, or what about the lighting? Or they never did. They passed it without even knowing it a year before they even, realized it. So anyway, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. Let's say that. And the one good thing that came out of Cody is that because of that, and because of people reporting, people getting involved, people talking, people posting, people like you posting about it, reposting, other cities like Fairview that come along, they're up to speed very quickly, and it can make a difference there like it has. So do you want to say anything about the decision, RFM? You had read that?
I did read it, but I don't really have anything to
Yeah.
add.
It was pretty clear. It just passed. I mean, they just agreed with the district court that it had been passed.
The
So,
whole thing happened because the initial vote, right?
uh-huh.
There's 7 people on
Yep.
the board, on
Yep.
the city council. 2 of them are gone,
Yep.
leaving 5. 3 of them vote for it, 2 of them vote
Yep.
against. And they believe that that did not pass it because they
Right.
believed you had to have a majority of the entire number of the
Right.
board, whether they
Everyone.
were present or not. And 3 is not a majority of 7.
Yep.
When actually the freaking statute actually says you have to have a majority of the members present.
Yeah. No, that's it. And they
3
also go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So it passed there. Now the problem wasn't just that. The problem is that the city council did not know that they had passed it.
Exactly.
So therefore they said, they continued for another hearing about it for another issue several weeks
Mm-hmm.
down the road. And then it wasn't resolved and they did something else and they continued another few weeks down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they ended up passing it. Okay. The problem is that you have 30 days to file a notice of appeal. And the citizens filed their notice of appeal within 30 days of the last decision.
Right.
This is the problem. And for whatever
It had been
reason,
passed months earlier. They
yes,
had no knowledge of that. They thought it was not passed. They
right.
continue to have hearings. Why would anyone file if you thought it had not passed? This is the confusion that happens with the inside man in a city. And this is what happens. A temple being built in your town is a once in a lifetime situation. These towns, it brings out these, oh my gosh, our code isn't written right, or our ordinance is weird, or we haven't thought about this, or what about voting? You're seeing that in every single town. They had no chance. They had no standing because it was all a done deal long before anybody really even realized what was happening.
These deadlines are very strictly enforced. You've got 30 days. And the problem is that they filed it within 30 days of the last order that was entered. But on appeal, and the Supreme Court agrees that it was at that earlier hearing where they had 3 to 5 and they didn't think they passed it. Actually, they had passed it. That was the end of it. And that started the 30 days ticking, which they blew totally because they hadn't even had the last hearing within 30 days.
Yeah,
So
it was over in June of 23. And you know how long we've been discussing this on the newscast. We didn't even have the newscast then yet. And Mormonish, it was already over. We were beating a dead horse and no one knew it.
Right. So they blew this. The bottom line is they blew the filing period, the 30-day deadline to file their notice of appeal.
Yep. So there we go. So the temple, it has full go ahead. Like I said, it's already been being constructed, but now it has full go ahead and they can do whatever they want. There were no conditions. There was nothing. They had no chance to make any kind of stipulation to limit lights, to do anything. The church can simply build what it wants. And I just hope that it really will be a good neighbor, because you guys know how you got this in there and you should be ashamed. Sorry.
Can I advocate for a change in the law?
I hope
These
so.
deadlines have always been hard and fast. But can I suggest that there might be a change in the law to say, if a reasonable person would have concluded after, thoroughly examining all the facts and everything, that the notice of appeal didn't start ticking until this event. And they did beat that, right? Even though we're finding now in this rather complex and unusual set of circumstances that actually was here, a reasonable person could have thought later, so we're going to count this as good. I think that still takes care of the whole policy reasons for having this 30 days without being so merciless, unreasonably merciless to people who are the plaintiffs, who are just trying to file a notice of appeal and getting a higher court to make a ruling on it.
Yep.
without just, cutting them off in situations where you can totally understand why it is that they would think that
Yeah.
it hadn't started running yet.
Yeah. No, it's similar in Lone Mountain too, where they said the residents were not incorporated yet, but the ruling happened so fast. But I understand, there has to be order. So anyway, you can read a lot of different articles about Cody, but that's where we stand. We are done with Cody, and the residents say, you know what? They're not going to let it steal their joy, and they support the court, and they're going to move on because they're gracious, wonderful individuals. But a lot of them are moving. That happens too. All right. I have a couple other quick, simple.
While we might be done with Cody, we're not done with temples.
No, we have a few more really quickly. I'll go through here. So we have Fairview. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that is in there. There we go. Okay. Fairview, the zoning, we talked about how the residents there had petitioned to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and also filed a lawsuit. There's a couple things here that can happen. Did I put the meeting schedule in here? Yes, I did. Okay, that's right. So there's some public meetings coming up on it. The first thing, I'm trying to be quick here because I know the Fairview Zoning Board of Adjustments will meet in executive session on June 30th with their legal counsel. Remember how we talked about last week that the town council got legal counsel for the zoning board to receive a briefing on the legal and procedural matters. A public meeting to determine the board's jurisdiction. That's a question too. Do they even have the right to weigh in on this whole protest zone issue? And that hearing may take place on Monday, July 27th. And then there could be an appeal on Wednesday, July 9th. So it's all kind of moving forward. Now, here are some of the things that I kind of came up with that could happen. The Board of Adjustment could determine they don't have an authority, right? They can't even weigh in on this issue that the residents are saying, you were calculated our protest zone incorrectly. So it goes to district court. They could say that they do have the authority, and then there's going to be that public hearing. They could uphold that protest zone, that it was properly determined by the town. Then the residents are going to take it to district court. Are you getting the feeling here that it's just going to go to district court? The board could say that the protest zone was improperly calculated. If that happens, the council could actually have another vote on the temple. That would be interesting. Or the town could appeal the decision to district court. Or I guess number 5 could be the church could just say, I've had it, and decide to sue. So I feel like it is going to go to district court. RFM, do you think I'm right in that assessment?
Yes, I do. And I did look at the documents in this, and I just want to let you know, even though you don't have the documents put on the screen, the notice of appeal to district court, you notice all the caveats in it? Because right now they filed a notice of appeal to district court, even though the Board of Adjustment just has not made a decision.
Right.
But that's because the attorney there has anticipated that there could be the same problem that just goofed up the people in Cody.
Yep.
So he's filing his notice of appeal before the final decision is made in the administrative process. And he may have learned from their example. I don't know. But this is why he's doing that. So that if he's filing it now, which is out of order, but he's filing it anyway, because he says if this decision by the Board of Adjusters ends up not being needed, and the decision was actually earlier, we are within the 30 days. So we've got our notice of appeal in.
Yep, I think you're right. I think a lot of people do look and learn from Cody, and I wish somebody would do a whole documentary on it because there are a lot of lessons to be learned there. It's extremely interesting. So, yep, good analysis there. Okay, a couple more quick temple things. We have a temple international here. This is in Buenos Aires, right? And somebody sent this to me. It's an article. They translated it for me. It's in a very well-known newspaper there. And it says there seems to be, this is a synopsis of the article, there seems to be a situation brewing involving the construction of a new LDS temple in Buenos Aires. The official rendering was just released. That's the first time most people hear about it or know about it. And then boom, it's in the paper, or residents start to gather. The proposed temple is in the heart of the city. It's very tall, and it's very close to a Catholic church and a secular monastery. This is an operating monastery. Isn't that interesting? A temple right next door. I'll show you in the next slide. It's really close. The chosen construction site has archaeological value and may have human remains buried there. That's interesting. The conflict is already in the news with community opposition joined by the local Catholic archbishop. The locals want the location to just be a park, a green area for the community. So here's a rendering, this gigantic picture of the temple. They are going to put gardens around the temple, landscaping like they always do. So they're saying that'll be a benefit to the city. You can kind of see there the location there. This is the rendering here. There it is. There's the green space. And the top of the temple, you can see the monastery and the Catholic Church there. So,
oh my gosh. So the human remains buried there. This could be like Poltergeist 4.
It actually could, although we
They'll
do
have they'll have the swimming pool scene down in the baptistry.
I should have put that in there. Although we do have the ability to baptize for the dead. So I don't know if that would, maybe it's a win-win. I don't know. But interestingly, it reminded me of an episode we did about another temple in Brazil with somebody who was working on that project. And he says there are parallels there, an alliance with the high Catholic officials while throwing the local parishioners under the bus. This is what happened in this situation. Archaeological value, where, you know, they're able to somehow work with the State Department and say, oh, no, we don't care so much about that. Go ahead and build. The loophole of putting in a 60% area of gardens and green spaces to get it in, and the need to change zoning restrictions and being able to kind of manipulate and work with those governments there. And then he also says the timing when Argentina happens to be under a non-liberal regime, a neoliberal regime, favorable to U.S. interests. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But the point is what they're doing here in the U.S. with temples, it reaches a high government level in other countries, in some places. It's pretty interesting. And it's hard to get information on that because it's, you know, it's clandestine. Another temple in the news, the church has just bought 46 acres in Hawaii, in Maui area, to build a temple for $20 million. And 46 acres, that says infrastructure and apartments and homes and things like that. Something, there's got to be something there. But the person who posted this says, I thought this was great. Having lived on Maui, I burst out laughing when told the Mormon church was going to build a temple there. Do the math. Are there even 500 recommend holders in Maui? Oh yeah, LDS Inc. is building for visitors to attend after a day at the beach. That's my next slide there. And that's true. We have those destination temples. We have Rome, we have Paris, we have new temples in the UK. And I've seen ads for cruises where they're going to cruise around and drop you off to go to the temples. So that's my imagination there, where there's a temple right on the beach, right? You can go to the beach and then you can get in your temple clothes and go do baptisms for the dead or something.
That is costly virtue signaling.
I think it might be. Yeah, it certainly is. And a lot of people said, you know, we need affordable housing. They're still recovering from the fire. What is this? You know, why is this going to be here? And then the same person put out these stats saying 9 wards, 2 branches, 1 YSA. Honestly, with the membership being realistically around 1,800, and how many of those have temple recommends? You know, it's kind of the same story in every single place. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I don't know if we have time to play this. I thought this was kind of interesting. This is the Springville, Missouri temple, which, if you remember, that was the place where they would not say who they were in the city meeting. The town council kept saying, can you tell us who you represent? And the guy goes, I can't say. And they're like, what do you mean you can't say? I'm just a church. So there's a reason now. I think they don't, you know, let people know who they are. But anyway, it was approved. It's ready to be built. They were ready to start building. But then.
Oh, no.
Today I learned what it takes to stop construction of an LDS temple, and the answer is bats. That's right. The Springfield, Missouri LDS Temple is kind of on pause right now because of endangered bats and their hibernation schedule. Now, apparently these bats can't be disturbed, and on the site where the temple, they want to start construction, they have to clear a whole bunch of trees, and they're not allowed to do that for 7 months out of the year, I think until October. So they just found this out because they had applied for something to do with disturbing the ground as far as water, and that kind of triggered something in a federal database, and they were made aware of the bats. So for now, no construction on the Springfield, Missouri temple, and the bats will be able to sleep peacefully. Let me know what you think in the comments.
I love that. So everybody,
You gotta go find something endangered. That's what's going to protect your time. Find a bat, find an owl, something.
So bats hibernate in the summer in Missouri?
Who knew? But they can't start clearing out those trees until the hibernation's over. So anyway, I think that's finally the end of my temple news. I think we're on to Bill now.
All right. Let me just note, folks, about 2/3 of the audience is subscribed to the channel that they watch it on, whether it's the Mormonish channel or the Mormon discussion channel. There's 1/3 of you who are not subscribed. So please subscribe to the channel that you're watching this on. We very much appreciate it. Also hit that bell and make sure that you get upcoming episodes of the Mormon Newscast and the other things we're creating, Mormonish and Radio Free Mormon and Mormonism Live. So please do that, but please subscribe, and we very much appreciate it. The next story is steeple doctrine. So to come in with you having talked about the things going on with temples, we had been talking about how there will be ways in which the LDS Church will proliferate its steeple doctrine out into the world to establish the ability to go into courtrooms and say, here's the evidence that shows that we actually did teach these things. This was a Stars Insider article, Understanding the Architecture of Mormon Temples.
Oh.
So here's what it starts off with. Mormon temples are some of the most recognizable religious structures in the world. Their unique design and symbolism have intrigued people for generations with their towering spires and pristine white facades. They exude an air of both mystery and confidence. But what makes Mormon temples so distinct? Secrets lie behind their imposing walls. Click on to uncover the hidden meanings behind these structures. And I'll just note, people don't just create these articles out there. There wasn't some, news journalist sitting around going, I think I'm going to do an article on Mormon temples. I have to imagine the way these things work is that entities can pay some money and have some coverage of that entity.
This is written to be quoted.
Yes, it is.
That's it.
So the first slide here, hierarchical architecture. The massive Salt Lake Temple began in 1853 and completed 40 years later is a prime example of the symbolic nature of temple architecture. Brigham Young instructed the architecture to design the Salt Lake Temple with 3 towers on each side, symbolizing the church's leadership and priesthood. Now you have the Melchizedek priesthood presidency and the Aaronic priesthood presidency symbolized by those 6 towers. That would be enough to establish at least a bit of steeple doctrine, but they don't stop there. Highs and lows. The east towers, representing the higher Melchizedek priesthood, would be taller than the west towers, which symbolize the lower Aaronic priesthood. Well, they keep going. Strategic placement. The church's growth in the mid-20th century coincided with the suburbanization and car culture. Post-war temples like those in Washington, D.C. and Oakland were strategically placed along major roads, visible to countless drivers. These towering structures often resembled the Emerald City of Oz, served as powerful symbols of the church. Standing tall, man, this height thing doesn't stop, does it? While practical factors like land cost and the need for additional buildings influenced the choice of suburban locations, Mormon leaders and architects still invested in buildings that tower above their surroundings, representing the church's presence and aspirations.
How would it not represent the church's presence, regardless of how tall it was?
Well, it definitely represents their aspirations. So there it is. So that's the end of that one. I think there's an empty slide there. So I just will note, you're going to begin to see this more and more if the church really is set to fight on these temple height issues and make their temples as big as possible. They're going to want to have places that when they walk into a courtroom, they can point people to, and both within correlated curriculum, as well as the general public stating it in other places, all adds to the weight of the argument. And with that, we have a story on floodlight.
Yeah, that was a great find, Bill. I feel like maybe some of those quotes will be showing up in articles and conference, because you just have to show that there's a meaning to the steeple, and they've retrofitted the steeple with those meanings. So that was great. Wow. disappointing, but great. Okay. This is an article, actually just sort of a post I found from Floodlit. If you're not familiar with Floodlit, it is an organization that tracks anybody who is a member of the LDS Church who has been arrested for, an SA or a CSA kind of a crime. All the information they get is from, documented sources, legal sources. They do not operate on hearsay. They're very careful to make sure everything is very well documented. So this was something that I found particularly egregious, but not surprising. So I'm going to read this first part and then kind of skip through the others and get to what we're really going to talk about. So it says Floodlit has an update on, and again, I redacted all these names just because that's not what this story is about.
I'm not supposed to be able to read that name.
You can read it?
Yeah. Everybody can read it.
Where?
Well, right there. Let me guess. Is it Stephen Boyd?
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, it was in the article. That's weird. I can't see it on my side. I can't read it at all. How funny.
Okay, we can't see it then.
Yeah, all right. That's totally fine. Anyway, the point is that it was not about this perpetrator. It's going to be about the letter that his bishop wrote for him. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. It wasn't redacted anywhere else. I just did it. So Floodlit has an update on this individual, a Mormon member and 1991 BYU graduate. I figured that makes him about my age because I finished my master's in 91. He pleaded guilty on April 7th of this year to felony enticement of a minor, but the court held the plea in abeyance, meaning that the person can avoid a conviction and harsher penalties if he complies to some terms. So it goes on to talk about what he did. I'll just kind of skip through that very quickly. Basically, a police officer posing as a 13-year-old girl. He, started chatting with him and arranged to meet. They exchanged pictures, this kind of a thing. So definitely he was all on board with this kind of activity, although it ended up being, of course, a police officer that he's talking to. You guys can go back and pause on those if you want to read the details. I don't know. Why do these guys keep doing it? Don't they know that almost everybody on these sites is a police officer? I don't understand that.
I'm not laughing at what he did. I'm just laughing that every one of those you can see Boyd, B-O-Y-D.
You know what? It's fly. The name is out there all over the place. I was just trying to make it so it wasn't so overtly about the person, but that's really funny because I literally can't see it. It looks completely solid black to me. I mean, maybe you need to go to the eye doctor. Anyway, on May 20th of 2025, the plea in abeyance took effect for 3 years, during which the individual must be on the Utah Sex Offender Registry. He was ordered to serve 90 days in the Utah County Jail, and he was given credit for 7 days. He is to report by June 2nd at 5 p.m., so I'm assuming this has already happened. If he complies with the terms of his plea in abeyance, he will not be convicted and will no longer be required to be a registered sex offender. Floodlit has seen similar cases where criminal convictions of guilty pleas were expunged in Utah. Expungement would mean the court system would treat a perpetrator as if the alleged crime was never prosecuted, and a search for criminal records would come up empty. Do you want to say anything about that before we get to the next slide, RFM? Just so everybody understands, maybe explain what a plea of abeyance is. Just if he's good, if he does what they say, they're going to kind of expunge his record and it'll be as if it never happened. Oh, what?
What this looks like to me is that they're basically continuing the matter for 3 years, having him go to jail, but he can't do a sentence. I mean, you have to be convicted to do a sentence. I'm sure they have some kind of creative way around it.
Right.
But they're continuing this for 3 years under conditions, and if he complies with the conditions, it will be dismissed. That's how I read it.
Right. So, I mean, this is standard, but what was unusual here, or maybe not so unusual, unfortunately, and I'm going to have Bill or RFM read this. This is a letter written by the perpetrator's bishop.
Another one of these. When will they ever learn?
When will they ever learn? And it's interesting because I looked the bishop up. Oh my gosh, that means that everything I blacked out you can see. It's totally fine. It's on record.
It's too small for me.
I was trying to be, I was trying to be less overt. Anyway, his bishop has been in his position since August of 23, and this crime happened in November of 23. So he has been, he's been there all along. He's been the bishop of this individual. So RFM, do you want to read this? This is a letter from the bishop to the judge, basically pleading that he be treated lightly.
This is a guy who was on his way for a meet and greet with what he thought was a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the details are pretty sketchy. If you want to scroll back, you guys can all read them. But, it's exactly that. Pictures and determining, how old are you? And can I pick you up from school? And, it was pretty horrific.
Yeah. They have to meet all the elements of the offense.
Yep.
It says, Dear Judge Peterson, May 1st, 2025. So it's
Yeah, this
just a
just
month
happened.
ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I am currently serving as a ward bishop in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'll bet President Nelson is glad he's using the full name. A year ago, blank, a member of my ward, shared with me the difficult path he's been on throughout his life, culminating in the unfortunate events of November 2023. Since that time, it's been my privilege to meet with blank, this guy, my privilege, regularly to offer support and assess his progress. I've been consistently impressed by the specific and intentional efforts he has made to change his habits, attitude, and outlook over the past 18 months. One wonders how he's judging that. At other times in his adult life, he has struggled with depression, isolation, and negativity. While he would occasionally show improvement, those attitudes would soon return. However, the past 18 months have been a stark contrast to any other time in his life. His family members have repeatedly shared with me how much his daily attitude and habits have changed, and that these changes are sincere and have persisted for longer than ever before. He is more positive, quicker to help others, and shows resilient mental health. He is more patient, more forgiving, and truly happier. By the way, this whole letter, it just becomes, look, if this guy had sentenced him like pretty much anybody else, this letter would be distasteful. But this is in the context of this bishop writing a letter and this guy getting a real sweetheart deal. I don't know what the facts are in this case. They're usually pretty cut and dried because you got an undercover cop on the other end of the Craigslist ad pretending to be a 13-year-old and reeling him in. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's why usually they get the goods on them, and that's why they volunteer their age so that they have to show the guy knows or at least believes that they're under the age of consent, those kinds of things.
Right.
So usually these are kind of open and shut cases, but he's getting a really, really good deal, and it may have been based on, in part, on this letter. And if that's the case, then it becomes more concerning that the bishop is writing a letter on behalf of the guy who's being sentenced. Of course, I was going to say he's not writing on behalf of the victim, but in these strange cases, there is no victim.
In this case, but I've never seen a church leader land on the side of the victim.
Right. Even when there are victims.
Even when there are
no victim, it's because this is a fictional 13-year-old who's created by the law enforcement in order to reel in people like this.
Right. And thank God there's no victim. And this procedure is trying to stop there from being an actual victim by putting this person away over, the bishop's objection.
Yeah. Well, the bishop got his way, I think. I believe the intentional, you want me to keep reading this?
Yes.
I believe the intentional steps he has taken in the past 18 months led to these genuine changes. He has benefited greatly from regular visits to a counselor specializing in addiction, and to my knowledge has completely avoided negative behaviors since the event of November 2023. Is he talking about porn addiction? He hasn't said anything about any drugs. He has also taken specific steps to strengthen himself spiritually. By the way, porn addiction is something that does exist, but the church tends to see it in any use of pornography as an addiction as opposed to a non-addictive use. He has also taken specific steps to strengthen himself spiritually and stay close to his heavenly Father through frequent prayer and scripture study. He shows complete willingness to positive change. He is a blessing in the lives of his long line redacted.
Yeah, I think they're talking about relatives, names of relatives. He's a blessing to his family.
I thought maybe it was Wednesday evening.
Is he a blessing
bowling
to his
league.
family?
What?
I'm just sorry. It just makes me sick.
Yeah. He is a blessing in the lives of his Wednesday evening bowling league. He is a hard worker and has recently been successful as an entrepreneur as well as an employee. It's my strong opinion that a heavy sentence for him would have a severely negative impact on him on something as well as on his blank, his wife, and blank. His could be daughter, I don't know. His blank's career as a youth counselor would also be severely negative. What?
He has a relative, it looks like, who is a youth counselor. And the bishop's saying if his relative is known to be associated with this, perpetrator, that can have a very negative effect on his family members' business. So it seems to be about everybody
It's a very
in the
short
family
word.
and everybody's business, except for, well, no victim in this case, but these victims exist.
Finally, his behavior since November 2023 is a testament to the positive impact he is already making. I strongly believe that the likelihood of reoffending is as low as it could possibly be. Thank you for considering this letter. Sincerely. Now, the problem with this is that, I mean, if the guy is my problem with his letter is if the judge is a Mormon.
Yeah. It'll have sway. It'll have weight.
I think it's more likely to have more sway than it would otherwise. So he gets a really good deal. And this letter, how'd you get a hold of this letter, by the way, Rebecca? Great reporting as usual.
Yeah, Floodlit had posted it a while ago, and I was kind of keeping it on the back burner, but I just thought, there have been so many cases like this lately, and I, off the top of my head, can think of several more people I know personally, even when the church landed on the side of the church, even as far as like walking into court and family members seeing church representatives sitting on the side of the perpetrator, not the victim. And I don't know what that's about, but I just thought this was, and I don't know what the profession of this bishop is. I could probably look it up, but, is he qualified to say he has such a little chance of ever reoffending, or, he's a blessing, just the verbiage. But you're right. It completely, I think, could manipulate the court system here in Utah. So anyway, I just thought, and then Floodlit goes on to say, Floodlit has obtained dozens of similar letters from Mormon bishops and stake presidents to judges in support of men who were convicted of sex crimes, including child sex abuse. To date, we have not seen a single statement in any of these letters expressing sympathy or support for the victim. Yeah. And it's not just that, there is no even any sympathy. It's like, well, you're fine. You go over there. I've got to worry about the soul of this perpetrator because I can bring him back to Jesus. I can't. They just have absolutely no sympathy or support for these victims. And then again, it says, if you have any information about this case or his history in the Mormon Church, please reach out to Floodlit. If you guys haven't gone on floodlit.org, it's really interesting. They even have, how the church has indexing? Floodlit has indexing, where you can go through records and you can input them in a way, that they can be searchable. And so there are tasks that you can do for Floodlit to help in this, just to have the information in one place. So I don't know, any thoughts on this bill? I know it's unpleasant, but I thought, here we have an actual letter. This is how they think. This is what they do.
Somebody said it in the comments, but it's so true. I've lived it. You tell the truth, you get excommunicated. You sexually assault people, you might get a recommendation letter from your bishop. It's insane what the church and its leaders, local and higher up, make space for in terms of a lack of ethics and morality, and what they punish people for. It just makes no sense unless the end goal is simply to perpetuate a falsehood and abuse.
Yep. That's all I have on that. Let's move on to something more positive, shall we, Bill?
All right. So real quick, we've done updates on this before, so I won't spend much time on this, but Deseret News had an article. Tad Walsh, who is one of my two favorites, Scott Lloyd's the other one. They're my two favorite journalists out there covering Mormonism. Tad Walsh just did an article where they talked about now the hymn book has its next edition of hymns. 11 new Latter-day Saint hymns include the classic Still, Still, Still. You remember that one, right, RFM?
Still. By the way, I got banned from the Mormon Dialogue and Discussion Board because of Scott Lloyd.
Oh,
yeah.
What did you do?
Technically, it's because I called him a hack, but I still blame him because he is a hack.
He is a hack. There's also new songs like I'm a Pioneer Too. They also show down there below, I'm going to live so God can use me.
That is a spiritual. That is a clapping, stomping. This little light is mine. I don't know how they're going to pull that off in sacrament meeting.
Rebecca sent it to me last night.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. Yeah, it's an old spiritual, but it's like this little light of mine. I don't know that they'll be able to pull that off, but they can try.
And then the oldie but goodie, the Lord's My Shepherd, but with a new arrangement. So those are some of the new hymns that are out there, and old hymns with a new tune to them and maybe a new tempo as well. And then I'll move on here. I think this is my last story. I hope, just because we have gone a bit long. What's next for BYU quarterback Jake Retzliff? as civil lawsuit unfolds. Really, the bigger issue, I think, for our audience, I mean, he's gonna deal with the consequences of whatever comes about in this case, whether it's the honor code having to deal with him because of breaking the law of chastity, or if in fact they can demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed some sort of sexual abuse towards this woman with claims of even choking her. He'll suffer the consequences of that. But the issue for me here is more on BYU and how they're going to handle this, because the church has held everyone at the school, with some exceptions, to a strict honor code. And here's a star athlete. And this gets into the conversation we had last time about the NIL, name, image, likeness money that's been paid to him. So BYU is facing a complicated decision regarding its quarterback, Retzlaff, who is currently involved in a civil sexual assault lawsuit, but has not been criminally charged. The school must weigh whether to let him continue playing while the legal process unfolds, or to sideline him in light of the serious allegations. If BYU chooses to cut ties before the case is resolved, it could trigger legal and financial consequences, especially around the 7-figure name, image, likeness deal that Retzlaff has signed with the university's collective. The NIL contract obtained by the Salt Lake Tribune contains a morality clause, allowing BYU to terminate the agreement if a player's behavior, once proven, brings disrepute to the school. Legal expert Anderson explains that while such clauses are typical, the contract's requirement for actual proven conduct could complicate matters. If BYU moves to void the deal before the civil case is decided, Retzlaff could sue, claiming wrongful termination. More likely, BYU would try to negotiate a quiet financial exit rather than a hard cut to avoid further legal entanglements. Now, that's what the world news coverage has to say about this, and the Salt Lake Tribune was a reference point for other people who were commenting on this news. I think the bigger understanding for us and our audience is the honor code, that by simply having sex with his girlfriend, he's already broken a rule that BYU has clearly established as requiring some sort of discipline. And many people at BYU, under the same incident of having broken the law of chastity, again, I'm assuming the most innocent interpretation of the data, because even that breaks the rule at BYU. So what makes BYU's situation unique is its religious affiliation and accompanying honor code, which may lead to administrators to take the allegations more seriously than secular institutions like Texas Tech, which let a player with similar allegations continue competing. While BYU, go ahead, RFM.
Well, if the NIL contract has it in the language there that it has to be actual proven conduct of action that brings disrepute upon the school, then that could supersede just the basic morality play. I'm sorry, the honor code is what they call it.
Yeah.
Don't you think that his defense will be it was consensual?
I don't know that he said it, there anything happened.
That brings embarrassment onto BYU because it breaks the honor code, unlike any other school. So simply defending yourself by saying, and all this is alleged, whatever, but if you were to try to say that alone, like you said, Bill, because of the honor code, that could bring disrepute and embarrassment to BYU, and he could be kicked out of his contract just for that.
Yeah. And
on appeal, how does BYU win that on appeal when the issue is whether having consensual sex with your girlfriend in an off-campus apartment brings disrepute upon the school?
Because everyone knows the standards of BYU, and they expect the people that go there to uphold them. And if it were public, then the school would be seen as, oh, we're still letting them be here. And, we're talking out of two sides of our mouth. I personally know, I was just trying to count up how many people got kicked out simply for having, consensual sex with a girlfriend or boyfriend. So yeah,
certainly
it's a
they can.
situation.
My question, and I haven't read the contract, but it seems like it may be a special case for him that he can't get out of the contract. Maybe they could kick him out, but he's still got the contract, right?
Yeah, no, they would
him
kick
out, voids
him
the
out.
contract, then they've got a problem with the contract.
Right, but then he could sue. So probably what they'll do is just buy him out. Let's just agree. You take some money. Let's just go. Right. And I know his lawyer is you have to try to tell everybody this wasn't a crime. I mean, if it wasn't a crime, we don't know any of those details yet. But say, the suit didn't exist. Say it was just, he was caught having sex. At other universities, that's not a crime, like Bill just mentioned. So yeah, it's fraught.
That's
The
just
rape
called
allegation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
That's just called college. When you go to college and have sex with your girlfriend,
Right.
that's just the college experience. But
Right.
BYU is a different animal. RFM, what were you going to say?
I'm thinking.
But again, we don't know the scenario, and we're not weighing in on the civil suit at all. We're just talking about other scenarios having.
Doesn't it
around kind of.
seem like
Oh.
well, go ahead, RFM, please. I was just
What
going
I'm
to
saying is that the rape allegation is hovering over this
Mhm.
to the point where Retzloff may be ill-disposed to take any kind of settlement offered by BYU because it would be seen as a tacit admission to the allegation of rape. Even though they're separate and distinct, the public mind would probably see it that way.
the question that's at the forefront of my mind is breaking the honor code sufficient for breaking the contract on BYU's end? And they may, on the rape allegation, they may have to wait that out because, again, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But it seems like the way BYU is set up, they can and would with any other person who's not a star athlete in this situation, they would immediately take some sort of significant disciplinary action. And if this guy is allowed to play football for Brigham Young University as this case wends its way through, what it essentially tells everyone is that BYU athletes in the honor code, that they're above that, which is much different than the average student. And I think BYU is in a position here where, in order to maintain any integrity, which they don't have much left anyway, to maintain any, they almost have to not let this kid play and essentially suspend him on honor code violations alone and allow this case to work its way through. I'll finish this up. It says, while BYU acknowledged being aware of the lawsuit, it declined to comment further, citing privacy laws. The decision will ultimately test how the university balances legal caution, moral standards, public relations, and financial obligations in an era where college athletes are increasingly treated like professionals. And so we'll see what happens here as time goes on. But that's the end of that story.
I wonder if there will not be some kind of protesting, at his practices or at games from women on campus saying, BYU, how can you let, do you know what I mean? Possibly.
Yeah.
It might happen.
I
And
do.
that would be an embarrassment to BYU if there were some organized protests saying, we can't have this guy here.
But according to at least that snippet of the contract, the embarrassment has to rise from the breach of the contract, the alleged breach, which would be allegedly having consensual sex at a minimum, right? Okay. But just because there might be protests later on that cause embarrassment to the school, I don't think that means that what Retzloff did caused the embarrassment. I think that's too far attenuated.
We'll have to see what happens next. And Bill, you can go ahead and skip my next thing. I'm going to save it till next week so we can spend some time on it. So,
okay, then what we've got left is just a conversation about what we've got going on this week. That does it for all the stories of the Mormon Newscast. What are you guys working on this week?
I think I have a slide because mine's coming up tomorrow. It's a really interesting, oh my gosh, unoriginal Jim. He's one of our favorite guests. He's the one that did the fiery airplane spiral of death with us. I know you guys have covered that first. But here he's going to talk about why a literal Hill Cumorah is a huge problem for Mormonism. It's a super fascinating episode where he goes through all the things that have happened in that area as far as transportation and digging and, just everything. And there's nothing there.
We're talking about New York.
Yes, exactly.
Not the real Cumorah down in southern Mexico.
Exactly. Okay. No, that had to happen after there was nothing in the real Hill Cumorah. But yeah, it's going to be really
how we know this isn't the right Hill Cumorah. There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. That's right. And he goes through the whole history of it and why it's such a problem that, for all of us growing up, it literally was the Hill Cumorah. So this will be fascinating. It's on Tuesday night, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
What's going on Wednesday, Bill?
Well, let me grab an image here that will suffice for now to show what we're doing. This right here. So you and I had talked during our last conversation around the missing scroll theory that there was a new Book of Abraham gospel topic essay of sorts,
Right.
that is completely separate from the original Book of Abraham translation gospel topic essay.
It's
And
the missing scroll.
And I don't think you were aware of it. And so Wednesday, we will go through it. And my big question for you and for the audience when we do this, it talks more about the origin of the Book of Abraham, but it covers all the same stuff, is why is there a need for two gospel topic essays that both defend the Book of Abraham with essentially the exact same arguments? And I'll leave that for you and the audience to ponder. You can ponderize it all the way till Wednesday at 6 p.m. When we do Mormonism Live, and we talk about the second Book of Abraham gospel topic essay, which released like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, but had gone sort of unnoticed by a lot. I know, Rebecca, I think you had made mention of it at some point, so I knew you were aware, but I had not read it yet. And
I hadn't either. I thought people were just mistaking the first one for a new one.
No, it takes two. Takes two to cover that topic.
Yeah. And I went through it over the last few days, put some sections into the slideshow, and I'm really curious to, again, my pressing question, RFM, is why the need for a second essay that covers essentially the same information? So
it's a bad idea in the first place if you don't want people reading it.
Yeah, to make two of them.
You're bound to stumble on it somewhere since it's not obvious, right?
Twice as likely to find it. So there you go. It must be a big problem that you need two essays to cover it. So there's that little play on the Wizard of Oz here, the man behind the curtain. Anything else, RFM, that you're working on in the upcoming days?
Boy, no, I hadn't even had a chance. I'm going to go over those slides tomorrow. We'll look at those, and then I'll see if I can have time to come up with a new thing with Colby where we thought as a premise for a show, and hopefully this is going to work out. To have,
do you guys want to mention anything about your event that's only just like a month and a week away?
So happy to. I felt like it was wrong to do it on the newscast to promote our.
I don't know, if I had an event, I would mention it on the newscast.
Yes,
we may have an event altogether.
I say do it. Just mention it. I think it's great.
Well, excellent. We have an event August 2nd in Salt Lake City. Radio Free Mormon and I will be at Sunstone. RFM, anything you want to say about the event, or anything you want to add to get people excited for it?
I'll be there.
You'll be there.
That's all. That's all I need to know.
It should be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. It's a great space that Bill's found. Hope there's going to be great food, and we're just going to have a wonderful time. The other thing is,
buy tickets, right? So you have to go somewhere. You have to find them. It's popped up a couple times for me, but I'm not sure how to get there. Exactly.
Yes, I think Rebecca's cueing us.
Yeah,
I was trying to buy some time by sending it over your way. If you'll buy me just another minute, I'll get a link for it.
And he's going to get another link for it now. Can I just say something about
this? You did this in St. George, and the feedback was incredible. Like, it was amazing.
It was like amazing. By the way, to continue the thought, I've been working with Colby. It's in the initial stages. Hopefully, we're going to have a show about teaching everybody about the most common logical fallacies, and then saying the names, what they are, and then giving examples from Mormons who have violated those logical fallacies. So it would almost be like if we put them all on playing cards, it would be like an author's deck, except it'd be a Mormon apologetics, a Mormon logical fallacies deck. Is that the link there?
That's the link. August 2nd, Salt Lake City. It's at the Boys and Girls Club building there in Salt Lake City. There are 60 tickets total. We're already at 16 sold. And I'm just telling you, knowing how the first one went, starts off a little slow, and then suddenly within a couple of days, all the tickets are gone. So if you want to go to this, check your calendar, make sure you're available that day. If you're going to be in Salt Lake City for Sunstone, we're going to be there too. I'll be doing something to Sunstone on Friday. RFM has got a session on Saturday, but then Saturday evening, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., we're all going to hang out together. And if you want to grab your ticket, dinner is included with that. And anything else you want to add to that? Otherwise, I've said it.
That was it. I think that We've announced ourselves out. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Rebecca?
Nope, I think it's fantastic. I'm going to go try to get a ticket because, I never get to just hang out with you guys, just hang out. I have to buy a ticket. So
Well, things are underway for us to have a special event. But
it would be fun. I would love to have a newscast panel event. That would be fun in
we
person.
might even do it on a Monday night and broadcast the newscast live with an audience.
That
That would be
is
cool.
something to look into. I would love that. Let's talk
Thank
about
you.
it. Let's figure it out.
Thank you. That would be the
Awesome.
4th, I think.
Yeah.
August 4th.
Yeah, that would like right after Sunstone that Monday. Let's do it.
That would be the Monday.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you. Thank you for all the work you guys put in covering the news in this arena of Mormonism. Thank you to all of you who join our show to be part of the newscast. We appreciate your comments. Please leave your comment in the chat, whether it's when you're watching live or whether it's afterward. Leave us your comments. Let us know what you think, which stories impacted you the most, and what things you'd like to see us cover in the future. If you see a news story, please do go on our Facebook page and you can post a comment there about whatever news you're seeing to make sure it's on our radar. Otherwise, we'll see you next Monday at 6 p.m. for the next episode of the Mormon Newscast. So long, everybody.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.